Hello everyone, and welcome to the Ben 10 What Ifs. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Ben 10 awakened his dark Omnitrix form. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Corruption. The vibrant purple sunset of Xenon 7 cast long shadows across the ruins as Ben Tennyson crouched behind a fallen pillar, watching the archaeological team work. 6 years had passed since he'd last seen Kai Green, yet there she stood, directing the excavation with practiced authority, her midnight hair now cut in a practical bob that framed sharp cheekbones. The slight scar along her jawline was new, a souvenir from some adventure he knew nothing about. Ben absently twisted the Omnitrix on his wrist, the device having evolved alongside him over the years into a sleeker, more integrated design. At 22, he'd outgrown the cocky teenager phase, replacing it with the measured confidence of someone who had saved the universe more times than he cared to count. His lean frame had filled out, and the perpetual stubble along his jaw gave him a rugged appearance that matched his battle-tested plumber commander uniform. Commander Tennyson, scans detect unusual energy patterns emanating from the central chamber, Rook's voice crackled through his communicator. Similar to the readings that prompted Magister Tennyson to dispatch us here, but significantly stronger. Copy that. Maintain perimeter surveillance, Ben replied, voice pitched low. I'm going to make contact with Dr. Green's team. The mission parameters from Grandpa Max had been frustratingly vague. Investigate anomalous energy readings at the Xenon 7 archaeological site. Assess potential threats, and report back. Standard procedure would have been to announce his presence immediately, but something about this situation had triggered Ben's rarely heeded caution. Perhaps it was the encrypted warning attached to Max's briefing, a simple phrase that chilled him. Azimuth believes the Omnitrix may be vulnerable. Ben rose from his concealment and approached the excavation, noting how the alien workers, a mix of Galvan technicians and Petrosapian excavators, tensed at his arrival before recognizing his insignia. Kai didn't look up from the artifact shish. Was examining through specialized lenses, her fingers hovering centimeters above its obsidian surface without touching it. Didn't think ancient rocks were important enough to warrant plumber intervention, she said without looking up. Apparently having recognized his footsteps. Especially the attention of the legendary Ben Tennyson. Nice to see you too, Kai. Ben stopped a respectful distance from the artifact. What exactly did you unearth here that's broadcasting energy signatures across 3 sectors? Kai finally looked up, her expression professionally neutral despite the history between them. We don't know yet. The hieroglyphs call it Karaini's shadow, loosely translated as the darkness that transforms in ancient Galvanic. It's unlike any technology we've encountered before. She gestured to the object, a pyramidal crystal approximately the size of Ben's palm, its surface so black it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The composition appears similar to Galvan Ultra Tech, but predates their civilization by at least 50,000 years, a Galvan researcher added, adjusting his spectacles. We've detected quantum fluctuations suggesting dimensional properties beyond our current understanding. Ben studied the artifact with growing unease. Something about it seemed to pull at his attention, a subtle vibration he felt more in his mind than through his senses. Have you tried moving it? That's next on the agenda, once we've completed non-contact analysis. Kai placed her tools aside and straightened, finally meeting his eyes directly. As the something specific you're worried about, Ben. The plumbers don't typically send a commander for routine artifact recovery. Before he could answer, the ground beneath them trembled. Not the familiar tremor of tectonic activity, but the rhythmic impact of something massive approaching. Ben's hand instinctively moved to the Omnitrix as Rook's urgent voice came through his communicator. Commander, we have incoming hostiles. Multiple airborne craft of unknown configuration breaching our perimeter. The excavation team erupted into controlled chaos, researchers securing samples while personnel moved into defensive positions. Ben activated his communicator. Rook, coordinate evacuation. Priority on protecting research data and personnel. And the artifact? Kai asked, already erecting her team to pack up their equipment. The decision crystallized in Ben's mind with the clarity that came from years of making split-second choices. I'll secure it personally. If someone's attacking because of this thing, we need to understand why. As if responding to his words, the obsidian pyramid pulsed, emitting a subtle wave of energy that washed over the chamber. The Omnitrix on Ben's wrist flickered momentarily, its green interface shifting to purple before returning to normal. "Did you see that?" Ben asked, examining the device. Kai nodded, her expression grave. "It responded to you, or to the Omnitrix?" "Ben, maybe you should." The ceiling exploded inward, raining debris throughout the chamber. Ben reacted instantly, slamming his palm onto the Omnitrix. The familiar gray flash enveloped him as his DNA reconfigured into Diamond Head, his crystalline form expanding to shield Kai and the nearest researchers from falling stones. "Get to the transports," he commanded, voice resonating through his transformed body as he created a crystalline barrier overhead. "I'll hold them off." Through the newly created opening in the ancient ceiling, Ben spotted the attackers, sleek insectoid craft piloted by figures whose bodies seemed to shift between solid and vapor. He'd never encountered this species before, but their intent was clear as energy weapons charged on their vessel's undersides. "Harvesters," Kai gasped, recognition and fear mingling in her voice. "They're supposed to be extinct. What are they harvesting?" Ben demanded, bracing as the first energy blast struck his crystal shield, sending fracture spider webbing across its surface. "Transformation energy," she replied, already moving toward the artifact. "They consume the energy released during metamorphic processes. Your Omnitrix would be the ultimate feast for them." Understanding dawned as Ben reinforced his shield. The Omnitrix didn't just transform him, it was a reservoir of transformity. On energy unlike anything else in the galaxy. If these harvesters fed on such energy, no wonder they'd come. "Get everyone out," Ben ordered, shifting his strategy. "I'll draw them away." As the excavation team retreated, Ben launched crystal shards upward, piercing the nearest craft's propulsion system. It spiraled away, smoke trailing from its damaged hull. The remaining vessels concentrated their fire on his position, their weapons surprisingly effective against his crystalline form. Ben touched the Omnitrix symbol on his chest, triggering a transformation into Jetray. His sleek, aerodynamic body shot upward through the opening, drawing the attacker's attention away from the evacuation below. The harvesters immediately gave chase, their ships faster than he anticipated. "Come on, you hungry bugs," he muttered, banking sharply between ancient spires. "Let's see how good your appetite really is." 3 vessels pursued him, their weapons systems tracking his movements with disturbing accuracy. Ben weaved through the ruins, using the terrain to his advantage while firing neuroshock blasts that seemed to have minimal effect on their hulls. Whatever these ships were made of, it absorbed energy attacks efficiently. "Ben," Kai's voice came through his communicator. "The artifact, it's destabilizing. The energy readings are off the charts." Ben risked a glance backward and saw a column of purple light erupting from the excavation site. The distraction cost him as a harvester beam grazed his wing, sending him spiraling toward the ground. He managed to pull up at the last moment, transforming into cannonbolt to absorb the impact as he crashed through an ancient wall. Rolling to a stop, Ben unfurled from his armored sphere, assessing the situation. He'd circled back to the excavation site, where Kai stood alone beside the artifact, which now hovered a meter above its pedestal, pulsing with violet energy. "What happened to evacuation?" he demanded, transforming back to human form as he approached. "I couldn't leave this," Kai replied, not taking her eyes from the floating pyramid. "It's reacting to the Omnitrix, Ben. Look." The artifact rotated slowly, one face always oriented toward Ben regardless of his position. The Omnitrix was responding too, its interface cycling through alien silhouettes at unprecedented speed. "We need to shut this down," Ben decided, reaching for his communicator. "Rook, status on the rest of his sentence died as a harvester ship crashed through the remaining ceiling, its damaged systems failing as it careened toward them. Ben lunged for Kai, shoving her away from the artifact's pedestal just before the ship impacted. The collision unleashed a blinding flash as the vessel's power core ruptured, energy cascading into the hovering artifact. For one suspended moment, everything seemed frozen, the debris hanging in midair, the flames motionless, even sound itself halted. Then the artifact shattered, releasing a wave of shadow-like energy that engulfed Ben before he could react. The Omnitrix shrieked an unfamiliar alarm as tendrils of darkness wrapped around it, seeping into the mechanism. Pain unlike anything Ben had experienced coursed through his body, not the physical agony of battle wounds but something deeper, as if his very DNA was being rewritten. He fell to his knees, watching in horror as the Omnitrix's interface turned from vibrant green to deep violet, then obsidian black, before cycling back to green with a faint purple undertone. Ben. Kai's voice seemed distant despite her kneeling beside him. Your eyes. Before he could ask what she meant, the remaining harvester ships descended through the opening, weapons trained on them. Ben struggled to his feet, the Omnitrix feeling abnormally heavy on his wrist. Its energy signature somehow altered. Stay behind me, he managed, selecting Homungosaur from the dial with trembling fingers. As the transformation began, Ben knew immediately something was wrong. The familiar green energy was now streaked with shadow, and the power rushing through him felt fundamentally different, darker, more primal, but undeniably stronger. When the transformation completed, he towered in a form recognizable as Homungosaur but dramatically altered. His scales were obsidian with pulsing purple energy lines tracing organic patterns across his massive frame. Bony protrusions extended from his shoulders and spine, and his eyes glowed with the same violet energy that had consumed the artifact. What's happening to me? The voice that emerged was deeper, resonating with power that made the very air vibrate. There was no time to ponder the change as the harvester ships opened fire. Ben raised an arm instinctively, expecting to feel the impact of their weapons. Instead, shadows coalesced around his limb, forming a barrier that not only blocked the energy beams but absorbed them completely. Surprise gave way to tactical assessment as Ben tested his transformed state. This shadow version of Homungosaur possessed all the original's strength but with significant enhancements. He could manipulate the shadows themselves, forming barriers, weapons, even extensions of his limbs that struck with devastating force. The first harvester ship crumpled under his shadow-enhanced fist, its hull buckling like paper. The second attempted to retreat, but Ben's reflexes were preternaturally fast. He seized the vessel with tendrils of darkness and crushed its propulsion system before tossing it aside. The third craft deployed its occupants, 7-foot insectoid beings with translucent exoskeletons that shifted between solid and gaseous states. They chittered in a language Ben's universal translator couldn't decipher, but their intent was clear as they converged on him. Specialized appendages extending to drain energy directly. I don't think so, Ben growled, feeling an unfamiliar aggression surge through him. The shadows around his form thickened, becoming almost tangible as he waded into the attackers. Each blow connected with devastating impact, the harvester's phase-shifting abilities proving ineffective against whatever energy now empowered him. Within moments, the attackers lay defeated, their bodies solidified and still. Ben stood among them, breathing heavily not from exertion but from the intoxicating rush of power coursing through him. It felt magnificent, addictive, the strength, the speed, the absolute dominance over his enemies. Ben. Kai's voice broke through his thoughts, her tone cautious. Are you still, you? The question jerked him back to awareness. Was he still himself? Something felt different beyond the physical transformation, a darkness in his thoughts, a predatory satisfaction in the violence he'd just committed. Harvesters were sentient beings, yet he'd felt nothing but contempt as he struck them down. I think so, he answered, focusing on reverting to human form. The process was slower than normal, the shadows seeming reluctant to relinquish their hold before finally receding into the Omnitrix, which now displayed its usual green glow with only the faintest purple tint at its edges. As his human form stabilized, Ben stumbled, sudden exhaustion washing over him. Kai caught his arm, supporting him with surprising strength. Your eyes, she said again, studying his face intently. They're still. Still what? Ben asked, a sense of dread building. See for yourself. She activated her hollow projector, creating a reflective surface in the air before him. Ben's reflection showed his familiar features, but his normally green eyes now glowed with the same violet energy that had consumed the artifact, faint tendrils of shadow occasionally flickering at their corners. What happened to me? He whispered, touching his face as if expecting to find some physical alteration beyond the eyes. I think. Kai hesitated, choosing her words carefully. I think the artifact's energy merged with the Omnitrix. And by extension, with you. The hieroglyphs mention transformation, but not like this. Before Ben could respond, his communicator activated, Rook's concerned voice breaking through. "Commander Tennyson, please respond. The energy surge disrupted our communications. Are you and Dr. Green unharmed?" "We're alive," Ben replied, not quite answering the question directly. "The harvesters have been neutralized, but we have a situation with the artifact. It's merged with the Omnitrix somehow." A brief silence followed before Rook's measured response. "Understood. Plumber reinforcements are securing the perimeter. I recommend immediate extraction and medical evaluation." "Agreed," Ben said, though something inside him resisted the idea of anyone examining the Omnitrix in its current state. This power felt personal, intimate in ways he couldn't articulate. "We'll rendezvous at the transport." As Ben deactivated his communicator, Kai was already scanning the Omnitrix with her archaeological tools, her expression growing increasingly troubled. "The quantum signature is unlike anything in our databases," she reported. "It's as if the artifact wasn't just technology but a dimensional key of some kind. The energy patterns suggest connections to spaces outside normal spacetime. That would explain the harvesters," Ben mused, fighting through his fatigue to think clearly. "If they feed on transformation energy, they might track dimensional disturbances associated with it." Kai nodded, continuing her analysis. "There's something else. The energy isn't just sitting in the Omnitrix. It's actively integrating with its systems. Rewriting protocols, creating new pathways. Can it be removed?" "I don't know," she admitted. "Not without risk ing damage to the Omnitrix itself, and potentially to you, given how deeply integrated the device is with your genetic structure." A distant explosion reminded them of the ongoing situation. Ben straightened, pushing aside his concerns for the moment. "We need to secure the site and evacuate your research team. Whatever's happening to the Omnitrix will have to wait." As they made their way through the ruins toward the evacuation point, Ben felt the shadow energy pulsing within the device, responding to his heightened awareness and tension. It wasn't just a passive alteration, it seemed almost sentient, adapting to his emotional state and surroundings. The plumber transport came into view, Rook efficiently coordinating the evacuation of Kai's research team. His expression remained neutral when he spotted Ben, but his eyes widened fractionally at the visible changes. "Commander," he greeted formally, though concern radiated through his professional demeanor. "The research personnel are secured, but we've detected additional vessels entering the system. Their configuration matches the harvester ships." "How many?" Ben asked, already assessing tactical options. 17 at current count," Rook replied. "More than we can engage directly with our present forces." Ben nodded, decision already made. "Get everyone aboard and prepare for immediate departure. I'll create a diversion to cover our retreat." "Ben," Kai began, her expression suggesting she knew exactly what kind of diversion he was planning. "I'll be right behind you," he assured her, though the promise felt hollow even as he made it. Something about the shadow energy within him craved confrontation, yearned to test its limits against worthy opponents. Once the transport was loaded, Ben moved to a clearing 50 meters away, ensuring the harvester ships would spot him easily. The Omnitrix responded instantly to his touch, the dial displaying unfamiliar silhouettes alongside his standard alien roster, shadow variants of his transformations. He realized. Ben selected Jetray, curious whether every transformation would manifest the shadow alterations. The energy that enveloped him confirmed his suspicion. Darker and more intense than the standard transformation process. When it cleared, he hovered on membranous wings that seemed formed from condensed darkness, his aerodynamic body covered in black scales with the same purple energy lines he'd seen on Shadow Homungosaur. This form felt faster, more maneuverable than regular Jetray, and the neuroshock blasts he tested against a nearby boulder aren't the usual pink energy but concentrated beams of shadow that disintegrated the stone completely rather than merely damaging it. "Upgrade indeed," Ben muttered, launching himself skyward as the first harvester ships appeared on the horizon. The aerial battle that followed was unlike any Ben had experienced before. Shadow Jetray moved with impossible speed, outmaneuvering ships designed for interstellar pursuit with ease. His attacks pierced defenses that had previously resisted standard neuroshock blasts, and he found he could briefly phase through solid matter by converting his form temporarily to pure shadow energy. The harvesters adapted quickly, however, deploying countermeasures that suggested intelligent coordination rather than mere predatory instinct. Energy nets designed to disrupt transformation processes forced Ben to dodge with increasing precision, while their weapons systems seemed calibrated to track shadow energy specifically. They've encountered this power before, Ben realized, narrowly avoiding a concentrated energy pulse that would have disrupted his transformed state. These weren't opportunistic predators but hunters with specific knowledge of their prey. As the battle intensified, Ben felt something shifting within his consciousness, a darker presence emerging alongside his tactical reasoning. It suggested more lethal approaches, urged him to strike at vulnerable points that would destroy rather than disable. The shadow energy responded to these thoughts, coalescing into deadlier forms around his limbs. With effort, Ben pushed back against the violent impulses, focusing instead on his original purpose, creating a diversion for the transport's escape. A quick glance confirmed the ship was already climbing through the atmosphere, nearly clear of the planet's gravity well. Time to disengage. Ben banked sharply, intending to break away from the pursuit and follow the transport. 3 harvester vessels anticipated the maneuver, cutting his retreat while the others closed in from remaining angles. They had him surrounded in a 3-dimensional net, each ship maintaining precise positioning to prevent escape. Smart, Ben acknowledged, hovering in place as he considered options. But not smart enough. He triggered the Omnitrix symbol on his chest, intending to transform into Big Chill to phase through the encirclement. The shadow energy surged in response. But instead of the transformation he selected, Ben felt himself shifting into a form he hadn't chosen, feedback, but altered by shadow just as Homungosaur and Jetre had been. Before he could process this unintended transformation, energy beams from all 17 ships struck him simultaneously, exactly what the conductoid form was designed to absorb. But rather than end the familiar sensation of channeling electricity, Ben experienced something far more intense as the shadow-enhanced feedback absorbed not just the energy but the dimensional properties of the beams themselves. Power beyond anything he'd ever channeled coursed through his transformed body, the purple energy lines pulsing brighter until they seemed to crack his obsidian skin from within. The harvesters realized their mistake too late, attempting to cease fire only after Ben had absorbed enough energy to create a feedback pulse that expanded outward in a sphere of concentrated shadow. The pull, say, didn't destroy the ships but disrupted their systems completely, sending them drifting aimlessly as Ben reverted to human form, the unexpected energy drain leaving him barely conscious as he plummeted toward the surface below. His descent lasted only seconds before strong arms caught him. Rook, having returned with a smaller scout ship after detecting the massive energy discharge. That was unnecessarily reckless, his partner chided, maneuvering the craft away from the disabled harvester fleet. Even by your established standards. Had to make sure they couldn't follow, Ben mumbled, shadow energy within the Omnitrix pulsing weakly as it recovered from the massive discharge. Did everyone get away safely? Affirmative. Dr. Green is particularly concerned about your condition. She has been reviewing the artifact data and has requested immediate consultation with Azimuth regarding the Omnitrix's alteration. The mention of Azimuth triggered an unexpected wave of defensive possessiveness in Ben. The shadow energy seemed to react, briefly intensifying before subsiding. I'm not sure that's necessary. The new capabilities could be valuable against threats like the harvesters. Rook studied him with the careful assessment of someone who had witnessed Ben's growth from impulsive teenager to calculated commander. The decision is not mine to make, but I would remind you at unexpected modifications to the Omnitrix have rarely concluded favorably in past incidents. Ben couldn't argue with that logic, though something within him resisted the idea of anyone, even Azimuth, examining or potentially removing the shadow enhancement. It felt right somehow, as if the power had always been meant to be part of him, merely waiting for the proper catalyst to emerge. The journey to the orbiting plumber vessel passed in silence, Ben using the time to take inventory of his condition. The fatigue was profound but different from normal exhaustion, more like his energy was being diverted to integrate the shadow power more fully with the Omnitrix. His eyes still glowed faintly purple, and occasionally shadows would coalesce around his hands when his concentration lapsed. The medical bay was already prepared when they docked, Kai waiting alongside plumber medics specialized in xenobiology and energy-based phenomena. Her expression softened with relief at seeing Ben conscious, though concern quickly reasserted itself as she noted his condition. The shadow energy is still actively integrating, she observed as he was helped onto a diagnostic bed. The process accelerated dramatically during your battle with the harvesters. You were monitoring? Ben asked, submitting to the medical scans with reluctance. The transport's sensors recorded everything, she confirmed, including your transformation into forms we've never seen before. The shadow variants are significantly more powerful than your standard transformations. One of the medics, a Galvan specialist, examined the readings with growing alarm. The energy signatures are altering your genetic structure at a fundamental level, Commander Tennyson. Not just when transformed, but in your human state as well. Is it damaging me? Ben asked, though he already knew the answer. The shadow energy didn't feel harmful, quite the opposite. Not damaging, the medic clarified, but changing. It's as if the Omnitrix is creating a new baseline for your transformations, with the shadow energy as a catalyst rather than an external power source. Before further analysis could be conducted, the ship's alert system activated, signaling an incoming transmission on a priority channel. The main screen activated to reveal a familiar face, Elena Validus, her dark hair now streaked with silver at the temples, her features more angular than Ben remembered from their last encounter years ago. Ben, she greeted, her expression grave. I detected the shadow energy discharge from 3 systems away. Please telephone. Tell me you're not attempting to interface with Umbral technology without proper containment protocols. Umbral technology, Kai repeated, stepping into view of the transmission. The artifact was pre-Galvan, not connected to any known civilization. Alina's expression shifted to one of recognition. Dr. Green, your reputation precedes you, though I'm surprised you didn't identify the quantum signature. The shadow artifact isn't pre-Galvan, it's extra-dimensional, specifically, from what my research terms the Umbral realm. And you know this how? Ben asked, struggling to sit upright despite the medic's protests. A sad smile crossed Alina's features as she brushed back her sleeve, revealing an arm covered in what appeared to be liquid metal, nanites, Ben realized, remembering her previous infection. Because I've spent the last 5 years studying interdimensional energy signatures while learning to control my condition. The nanites were drawn to shadow energy emissions similar to what you just generated. You've been tracking these artifacts? Kai asked, professional curiosity temporarily overriding concern. Not exactly tracking, but monitoring unusual energy signatures that might indicate interdimensional breaches, Elena explained. The nanites respond to certain frequencies that correlate with shadow energy. When I detected the massive discharge near XENON7, I fear someone had activated an Umbral device without understanding its nature. That would be me, Ben admitted, gesturing to the Omnitrix. The artifact merged with the device during a harvester attack. It's created shadow variants of my transformations. Alina's expression grew more concerned. The harvesters are involved. That confirms my worst suspicions. They're interdimensional parasites feed on transformation energy, and they serve as scouts for entities far more dangerous. What entities? Rook inquired, stepping forward. I need to see the Omnitrix modifications personally, Ina replied instead of answering directly. My research vessel is 6 hours from your position. Until then, Ben should avoid further transformations, especially the shadow variants. Each use strengthens the connection between the Omnitrix and the Umbral realm. And that's bad because, Ben prompted, feeling the shadow energy react defensively to the implied threat. Because the Umbral realm isn't just another dimension, Elena said grimly. It's a space between realities where shadow entities exist that make the harvesters look like minor pests. If the connection strengthens enough to create a permanent bridge. She left the sentence unfinished, but the implication was clear. Whatever had happened to the Omnitrix potentially threatened multiple realities, not just their own. I'll transmit what data we've gathered, Kai offered, already accessing the research team's findings. It might help you prepare before you arrive. After Alina's transmission ended, an uncomfortable silence fell over the medical bay. The plumber medics continued their scans, though they seemed increasingly perplexed by the readings. The shadow energy is stabilizing, the Galvan specialist finally reported. It appears to be reaching equilibrium with the Omnitrix's systems rather than continuing to alter them. However, the changes already made are substantial. Meaning, Ben prompted. Meaning the Omnitrix has integrated the shadow energy as a fundamental aspect of its transformation matrix. Removing it would require completely resetting the device to factory parameters, effectively destroying the current version and rebuilding from scratch. The prospect sent another wave of possessive defensiveness through Ben, the shadow energy pulsing in response. That's not an option, he stated flatly. Not unless absolutely necessary. Kai studied him with a scientist's analytical gaze. You're feeling protective of the shadow energy, she observed. Is that your assessment, or its influence on you? The question struck uncomfortably close to Ben's unacknowledged concerns. Was this new possessiveness his own feeling, or was the shadow energy affecting his thoughts? The line between the two seemed increasingly blurred. Both, maybe, he admitted after a moment. The power feels like it's always been part of me, just dormant until now. Like it's filling a space I didn't know was empty. That's consistent with umbral influence patterns, Kai noted, consulting her data. The hieroglyphs mentioned, awakening the shadow within, not imposing external power but revealing what already exists in darker form. Which means what, exactly? Ben asked, though a part of him already understood the implication. It means the shadow variants aren't alien forms being corrupted, she explained carefully. They're aspects of those species that already existed in potential, darker, more primal versions that the original Omnitrix was programmed to exclude from its transformation parameters. The revelation settled over Ben with disturbing clarity. Every alien in the Omnitrix had a shadow counterpart, not a corruption but an alternative expression of that species' evolutionary potential, emphasizing different traits and abilities. The shadow energy hadn't changed what the Omnitrix could become, it had merely expanded the options to include what had been deliberately filtered out. Azimuth created safeguards. Ben realized aloud. He limited the transformations to versions that wouldn't be too dangerous or destructive. A sensible precaution, Rook commented, concide. Ring your younger self's propensity for impulsive action. Ben couldn't argue with that assessment. His 16-year-old self with access to shadow variants would have been a genuine liability rather than an asset. Even now, with years of experience and discipline, he felt the pull of the shadow forms, raw power and aggression. I need to test the limits of these new forms, Ben decided, swinging his legs over the edge of the diagnostic bed despite the medic's protests. Under controlled conditions, before we encounter more harvesters, or whatever they're scouting for. Elena specifically advised against further transformations. Kai reminded him, though her tone suggested she understood his reasoning. And normally I'd agree, but we need to know what we're dealing with, Ben countered. If these shadow forms are as powerful as they seem, they could be crucial against whatever threat is coming. Better to understand them now than discover their limitations in the middle of a fight. After brief deliberation, Rook nodded. The training chamber can be reinforced with additional containment fields. I will personally monitor the session and terminate it at the first sign of dangerous instability. The ship's training chamber was a large, circular room with adaptable terrain features and advanced monitoring systems designed to analyze combat effectiveness. With Rook's modifications, it now included quantum containment fields specifically calibrated to shadow energy frequencies based on the readings from Ben's previous transformations. Kai and a small team of specialists served from the control room as Ben stood in the center of the chamber, the Omnitrix's interface displaying both his standard alien roster and their shadow counterparts, distinguished by a subtle purple aura around their silhouettes. I'll start with something basic, Ben decided, selecting the shadow variant of 4 arms. Physical power without energy projection capabilities should be easier to control. The transformation was slower than his standard shift, the shadow energy taking longer to reconfigure his DNA. When it completed, Ben stood 9 feet tall, his tetraman form dramatically altered from its usual appearance. Instead of red skin, his hide was obsidian black with purple energy lines tracing musculature patterns across his massive frame. The standard 4 eyes glowed violet, and additional armored plates covered vital areas, giving him a more warrior-like appearance. Vitals are stable, one of the specialists reported. Shadow energy levels consistent but elevated compared to previous readings. Ben flexed his 4 arms, noting the increased muscle density and the shadow energy that seemed to enhance his strength beyond a standard Tetraman's already impressive capabilities. When he struck the reinforced training dummy, it didn't merely dent as it would under a normal forearm's blow, it shattered completely, fragments turning to dust as they contacted the shadow energy surrounding his fists. Strength amplification factor approximately 320% above baseline Tetraman parameters, the specialist noted with professional detachment that couldn't quite mask his awe. More interesting than the raw power increase was how the shadow energy responded to Ben's intentions. When he focused on defense, it formed additional armor plates across his body. When he emphasized speed over strength, his muscle mass reconfigured slightly, becoming more efficient for movement rather than pure power. The shadow variants appear adaptable within their basic form parameters, Kai observed, responding to tactical needs rather than maintaining fixed capabilities. Ben cycled through several more transformations, testing the shadow variants of Diamondhead, Wildmutt, and XLR8. Each demonstrated similar patterns of enhancement, increased base abilities, adaptability to tactical situations, and additional powers related to shadow manipulation. Diamondhead could create constructs of shadow-infused crystal that phased through standard defenses. Wildmutt's senses extended beyond physical stimuli to detect dimensional energies. XLR8 could briefly step outside normal SP. Ace time to achieve speeds impossible within standard physics. With each transformation, Ben felt the shadow energy integrating more smoothly with the Omnitrix, the transitions becoming more efficient, and the power more responsive to his control. However, he also noticed subtle changes in his thought patterns while transformed: increased aggression, heightened territorial instincts, more predatory tactical assessments. I think that's enough for now, he decided after reverting from Shadow XLR8, noting the concerned expressions in the observation room. Any conclusions from the data? Several, Kai replied as she entered the chamber, tablet in hand. The shadow variants all show dramatic power increases, but more concerning is how they're affecting your neural patterns during transformation. Your brain activity shifts toward more primitive responses, fight-or-flight emphasis, reduced impulse control, heightened aggression. I noticed, Ben acknowledged. It's manageable, but definite. Really stronger than the usual personality shifts from transformation. There's something else, she added, displaying a three-dimensional model of energy flows within the Omnitrix. Each transformatio, N, is strengthening the connection to what Elena called the umbral realm. It's subtle, but the quantum signature is stabilizing, creating a more permanent bridge between dimensions. Before Ben could respond, the ship's alert system activated again, not the incoming transmission signal from earlier, but the proximity warning for unidentified vessels. Rook's voice came over the shipwide communication system. Commander Tennyson to the bridge immediately. Harvester vessels have emerged from unregistered dimensional ruptures. Count currently at 37 and rising. Ben exchanged a grim look with Kai before heading for the bridge at a run, the Omnitrix pulsing with shadow energy that seemed almost eager for the coming confrontation. Whatever was happening, it was escalating faster than anyone had anticipated. The bridge was a model of controlled chaos when they arrived, tactical officers tracking the rapidly multiplying harvester vessels while defensive systems came online. The main viewscreen showed the situation clearly, ruptures in spacetime opening throughout the sector, each disgorging multiple vessels of varying configurations but all bearing the distinctive organic-mechanical hybrid design of harvester craft. They're not approaching randomly, Ben observed, studying the tactical display. They're establishing a perimeter around us specifically. Affirmative, Rook confirmed. Their deployment pattern suggests containment rather than direct assault. We are being isolated from potential reinforcements. Why not attack directly? One of the tactical officers questioned. Their numbers would overwhelm our defenses easily. Because they're not here to destroy us, Ben realized, the shadow energy providing unexpected insight. They're waiting for something, or someone. As if responding to his words, the largest rupture yet tore open directly ahead of the plumber vessel. Unlike the others, this breach glowed with purple energy similar to what had consumed the artifact. From within emerged not another harvester ship but a massive crystalline structure that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, parts of it visible only as distortions in spacetime rather than physical matter. What is that? Kai whispered, the scientist in her momentarily overwhelmed by the sheer impossibility of what they were witnessing. Before anyone could respond, every screen on the bridge flickered, displays replaced by a single image, a figure that appeared humanoid but composed entirely of condensed shadow, its features indistinct except for eyes that glowed with the same violet energy now residing within the Omnitrix. Benjamin Tennyson, the figure spoke, its voice resonating not through the ship's communication systems but directly in their minds. You have awakened the key of shadows. The harvesting can now commence across all realities. Who are you? Ben demanded, instinctively stepping forward as if to physically confront the presence. I am Lord Umbra, master of the shadow between worlds, the figure replied, something like amusement coloring its mental voice. And you, wielder of the Omnitrix, have become my unwitting herald. What do you want? Ben pressed, feeling the shadow energy in the Omnitrix responding to the entity's presence, pulsing in recognition. I want what all beings desire, to fulfill my purpose. Lord Umbra's form shifted slightly, becoming more defined yet somehow more alien in its movements. The harvesters prepare dimensional pathways. I transform worlds. The cycle continues as it has across countless realities. Transforms how? Kai interjected, her scientific curiosity temporarily overriding caution. The shadowy figure's attention shifted to her, its gaze uncomfortably intense. The Orthi are awakened to their shadow aspects, as your companion has begun to experience. The unworthy are harvested for the energy released in their final transformation. Balance is maintained. Chill. L ran through Ben as he processed the implications. You're talking about genocide on a multiversal scale. I speak of evolution, Lord Umbra corrected. A process your own species understands well. The shadow variants within your device are not corruptions but perfections, forms that embrace their complete potential rather than limiting themselves to comfortable mediocrity. The shadow energy within the Omnitrix pulsed stronger, responding to the entity's words with what felt disturbingly like agreement. Ben fought against the sensation, focusing on the threat rather than the seductive logic behind it. Whatever you're planning stops now, Ben stated, activating the Omnitrix. I don't care what dimension you're from or what you think you're perfecting, you don't get to decide who's worthy of survival. Lord Umbra's expression shifted in what might have been appreciation. Your shadow self stirs strongly, Benjamin Tennyson. You resist, yet you are already changing. The key has kenned aspects of yourself you have denied for too long. Enough talk, Ben growled, selecting a transformation. Let's see how your evolution holds up against someone who's been saving universes since he was 10. As he slammed his palm onto the Omnitrix, Ben expected resistance or interference from the shadow energy given its apparent connection to Lord Umbra. Instead, it surged eagerly, EMB. Racing the transformation he'd selected. Feedback, the conductoid form that had previously manifested unexpectedly during the battle on Xenon-7. The shadow variant that emerged was even more dramatically altered than before. Its obsidian body now covered in additional conductive coils that pulsed with violet energy. The antennae extended further, branching into multiple receptors capable of absorbing energy across a wider spectrum of frequencies. Your choice reveals much, Lord Umbra observed, seemingly unperturbed by Ben's transformation. The conductoid form seeks connection, a bridge between energies. Your shadow self understands what must occur even as your conscious mind resists. What I understand, Ben replied, his voice distorted by the shadow energy flowing through his transformed vocal apparatus. Is that you're threatening my world, and that's never worked out well for anyone. Without waiting for a response, Ben channeled energy through his enhanced conductors, intending to disrupt the interdimensional communication. To his surprise, rather than severing the connection, his attack created a direct energy link between himself and Lord Umbra, information flowing both ways across the bridge he'd inadvertently established. Images flooded his consciousness, countless worlds transformed by shadow energy, some thriving in strange new evolutionary paths, others reduced to harvested husks. He saw the pattern repeated across dimensions, a cycle of awakening and consumption that had persisted for eons under Lord Umbra's guidance. More disturbing were the glimpses of himself in potential futures, commanding shadow-transformed armies, reshaping worlds according to his judgment of worthiness, standing as Lord Umbra's equal in the space between dimensions. The visions weren't presented as threats but as inevitable outcomes of the path he'd already begun walking. You see now, Lord Umbra's voice penetrated the flood of images. The key chose you because you Alred. Why possess the potential to transcend your current limitations? Your journey has prepared you to understand necessary sacrifice for greater purpose. With tremendous effort, Ben severed the connection, staggering backward as the energy link dissolved. The shadow feedback form fluctuated unstably before stabilizing, the Omnitrix itself pulsing with increased shadow energy from the direct contact with Lord Umbra. I've saved the universe enough times to recognize the difference between evolution and extinction, Ben retorted, regaining his composure. Your necessary sacrifice sounds a lot like mass murder with extra justification. Quote, Lord Umbra's expression shifted to something resembling disappointment. You resist understanding that has been offered freely. Perhaps experience will prove more effective than explanation. The harvesters will continue their preparations. When next we meet, Benjamin Tennyson, you will have begun to embrace your shadow nature, or you will be consumed by it. With those final words, the communication terminated, screens returning to their tactical displays. The massive crystalline structure began retreating back through the dimensional rupture, while T.H.E. harvester vessels maintained their containment formation. Orders, Commander, Rook prompted, hands poised over the tactical controls. Ben reverted to human form, the shadow energy reluctantly edding though his eyes retained their violet glow. Prepare for emergency dimensional jump. We need to reach Galvan Prime immediately. The harvester blockade, one of the officers began, is about to have a very big problem. Ben finished, activating the Omnitrix again. I'll create an opening. Be ready to jump the moment the path is clear. Before anyone could object, Ben transformed into shadow feedback again. The process smoother than before as the Omnitrix adapted to the increasingly familiar energy pattern. Drawing on the insights gained during his brief connection with Lord Umbra, Ben understood more clearly how the shadow variants functioned, not merely enhanced versions of his aliens, but expressions of their evolutionary potential when freed from biological limitations. Dive, RT all non-essential power to my position, he instructed, moving to the ship's external access port. I need to create a concentrated energy pulse to disrupt their dimensional anchoring. As the ship's engineers complied, channeling power through specialized conduits to the access port, Ben connected his conductoid form directly to the energy flow. The shadow enhancement allowed him to absorb far more power than a standard feedback transformation could safely contain, the excess converting to shadow energy that coiled around his form in pulsing tendrils. When he reached maximum capacity, Ben focused on the dimensional frequencies he'd glimpsed during the connection with Lord Umbra. The harvesters maintained their position through a specific resonance pattern that kept their ship's partia LLY anchored in their home dimension even while physically present in normal space, the source of their phase-shifting abilities. With precise calibration, Ben released a pulse of shadow-infused energy. Why that propagated outward at superluminal velocity, targeting the specific frequency the harvester ships used for dimensional anchoring. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Ships directly in the pulse's path lost their stability, phasing uncontrollably between dimensions as their crews struggled to compensate. Now, Ben shouted through the communication system. Jump while they're destabilized. The plumber vessel's dimensional drive engaged, tearing open a controlled rupture in spacetime distinct from the harvester breaches. As the ship accelerated toward the opening, Ben maintained his energy output, keeping the path clear until they passed the blockade perimeter. The transition was rougher than standard dimensional jumps, the ship shuddering as it passed through the rupture. Ben felt the shadow energy within him resonating with the dimensional boundaries they traversed, almost as if it recognized the space between realities as a familiar environment. When they emerged in normal space again, the tactical display confirmed successful escape. They were approximately 7 light minutes from Galvan Prime, well beyond the harvester's containment perimeter. Ben released his connection to the ship's power systems and reverted to human form, exhaustion washing over him in a wave that nearly brought him to his knees. Ben Kai was at his side instantly, supporting him as his legs threatened to buckle. Your energy readings are critically low. You need medical attention immediately. Later, he managed, though the room spun alarmingly around him. We need to reach Azimuth before the harvesters regroup. He needs to know about Lord Umbra and the Key of Shadows. First Thinker Azimuth has already been notified of our approach, Rook reported, maintaining his professional demeanor despite obvious concern. He has authorized emergency landing protocols and requested immediate transmission of all data regarding the artifact and the Omnitrix's alteration. Ben nodded weakly, allowing himself to be guided to a seat as the medical team rushed onto the bridge with emergency equipment. As they administered treatments to stabilize his depleted energy levels, he found High's thoughts returning to the visions Lord Umbra had shown him, particularly the future versions of himself commanding shadow-transformed armies. The disturbing part wasn't just the destruction those visions had contained, but how right it had felt in the moment, how natural the progression seemed from hero to arbiter of worthiness, from protector to transformer. The shadow energy had resonated with those possibilities, recognizing them not as corruptions of his nature but as extensions of decisions he'd already made countless times, determining who deserved saving, what threats justified lethal force, which rules could be broken for greater good. Your neural patterns are showing increased shadow energy integration, the medical officer reported, studying his scanner with concern. The Trans formation accelerated the process significantly. Is it dangerous? Kai asked, voicing the question Ben couldn't bring himself to articulate. The officer hesitated. Not immediately life-threatening, but the integration is reaching conscious thought processes, not just the transformation matrix. It appears to be rewriting certain neural pathways, particularly those associated with decision-making and moral reasoning. The implications hung heavy in the air. Ben closed his eyes, feeling the shadow energy pulsing through his system like a second heartbeat, familiar yet alien simultaneously. What had begun as a simple investigation had become a threat not just to his powers but to his very identity. "We'll reach Galvan Prime in 17 minutes, Rook announced, breaking the uncomfortable silence. First Thinker Azimuth has prepared specialized containment facilities to examine the Omnitrix safely." "And Elena?" Ben asked, remembering her earlier transmission. "Her vessel has a D-adjusted course to intercept us at Galvan Prime," Kai reported. "She's transmitted preliminary findings that might help understand the shadow energy's properties." Ben nodded, gathering his strength for the challenges ahead. Whatever Lord Umbra had planned, whatever the shadow energy might be doing to him, he refused to surrender to fatalism. He'd faced world-ending threats before, overcome impossible odds, even remade the universe once. This was just another problem to solve, admittedly one residing partly within himself, but a problem nonetheless. As the gleaming surface of Galvan Prime appeared on the viewscreen, Ben straightened in his seat, pushing aside his exhaustion through sheer force of will. Azimuth would have answers. He always did, even if they weren't the ones Ben wanted to hear. Between the First Thinker's genius, Elena's specialized knowledge, and Kai's archaeological insights, they would find a way to counter Lord Umbra's plans without sacrificing either Ben or the Omnitrix. The shadow energy pulsed once more within him, neither agreeing nor disagreeing with his assessment, merely waiting to see what choices would come next, and what potential they might awaken. Chapter 1 End Chapter 2, Shadows Within. The laboratory deep within Galvan Prime's science citadel hummed with precision instruments and whispered conversations. Azimuth stood on an elevated platform, High's diminutive form belying the weight of his authority as he examined holographic representations of the Omnitrix's altered code. Every few seconds, his eyes flicked toward Ben, who sat unnaturally still on an examination table designed for beings many times the Galvan's size. "Fascinating and disturbing in equal measure," Azimuth finally pronounced, dismissing one hologram with a flick of his fingers while expanding another. "The shadow energy hasn't merely added to the Omnitrix's functionality, it's rewritten fundamental aspects of the transformation matrix." Ben resisted the urge to fidget under the First Thinker's scrutiny. "Can you remove it? I created the most sophisticated device in the universe, Tennyson. Of course I can remove it." Azimuth's tone carried its familiar sharpness. But something in his expression softened. "The question is whether I should." That wasn't the response Ben had expected. "You're saying you want to leave unknown alien technology fused with the Omnitrix? That doesn't sound like you." "This isn't unknown technology," Elena interjected from her workstation across the lab. The silver streaks in her dark hair caught the light as she turned, the Nani Taze visibly shifting beneath the skin of her exposed forearm. "It's umbral tech, interdimensional rather than alien. There's a difference. In the 3 days since their arrival on Galvan Prime, Elena had proven herself invaluable. Her experience with the nanites had given her unique insight into how foreign energy systems could interface with biological organisms. More importantly, she approached Ben's condition with neither the clinical detachment of Azimuth's scientists nor the barely concealed worry that Kai couldn't quite hide. The distinction matters, Azimuth agreed, hopping down from H's platform to approach one of the containment fields where a fragment of the shattered artifact floated in suspension. This Key of Shadows wasn't designed to alter technology but to reveal potential. Based on my analysis, it doesn't add anything that wasn't already possible within the Omnitrix's parameters, it merely removes certain limitations I deliberately included. Safety protocols, Ben supplied. Remembering their earlier conversations, among other things, Azimuth stroked his chin thoughtfully. The Omnitrix was designed to promote understanding between species by allowing the user to experience life as other beings. I specifically filtered out more extreme evolutionary paths and aggressive adaptations that might color that experience unfavorably. Elena approached, her movements fluid but with a subtle mechanical precision that betrayed the nanites' influence. The shadow variants represent those filtered paths, don't they? Evolutionary branches that prioritized different traits. Precisely. Azimuth nodded. Not necessarily evil, but certainly more focused on survival, dominance, and power than the variants I selected for the original transformation catalog. Ben absorbed this information, trying to reconcile it with his experiences of the shadow forms. They hadn't felt inherently malevolent, just intense, primal, unfettered by the restraint he'd cultivated over years as a hero. So what happens if we remove it? He asked finally. Go back to the original limitations. A familiar voice answered from the laboratory entrance. We'd be ignoring a tremendous opportunity to understand interdimensional energy principles that could revolutionize our defensive capabilities. All heads turned to see Kai entering, tablet in hand and dark circles und. Are her eyes suggesting she'd been working through the night? Since arriving on Galvan Prime, she'd immersed herself in comparing the artifact fragments with interdimensional research from across the galaxy. Building a theoretical framework for understanding the shadow energy. That's assuming we could remove it cleanly, Azimuth added with uncharacteristic hesitation. The integration has progressed rapidly. Extracting the shadow energy now would require completely disassembling the Omnitrix and rebuilding it from base components. The shadow energy within Ben pulsed at these words, a sensatio. And he'd come to recognize as something between agreement and possessiveness. And that would mean, starting over, Azimuth said flatly. New calibration, new DNA samples, new everything. You would lose access to your current transformation catalog until it could be reconstructed. The implications sank in heavily. Years of acquired forms, mastered abilities, and fine-tuned transformations, gone. Ben had long since stopped being merely a kid with a watch. The Omnitrix was fundamentally part of who he was, how he defined himself as a hero. There must be alternatives, Elena suggested, her dark eyes narrowing in concentration. A way to stabilize the integration rather than reverse it. That's what I've been researching, Kai confirmed, setting her tablet on a nearby console. Complex equations and interdimensional coordinates scrolled across its screen. If we treat this as adaptation rather than corruption, we can establish parameters that allow controlled access to the shadow variants without accelerating the integration process. Azimuth studied her calculations with raised eyebrows. Impressive work, Drive, Green. Your understanding of interdimensional mathematics has advanced considerably since your doctoral dissertation. A hint of pride colored Kai's expression. I've had motivation to expand my expertise. The unspoken message hung between her and Ben. Her career trajectory had shifted after their relationship ended years ago, her archaeological focus narrowing to technologies and artifacts that interfaced with interdimensional spaces. Whether that change had been to distance herself from memories of their time together or to maintain some connection to his world of cosmic threats remained unclear. The approach has merit, Azimuth acknowledged after reviewing the data, but requires a stabilizing element we don't possess, a quantum regulator calibrated to umbral frequencies. I might be able to help with that, Elena offered, the nanites on her arm forming intricate patterns as if responding to her thoughts. The nanites adapt to energy signatures they encounter. After 3 days analyzing the shadow energy, they've developed rudimentary interfaces that could serve as temporary regulators. Ben watched the exchange with growing hope, though the shadow energy within him seemed to pulse with something like amusement, as if it knew something they didn't. Before he could examine that sensation further, a familiar voice called from the laboratory entrance. Is this a private genius convention, or can concerned family members join? Gwen Tennyson stood in the doorway, her anodite heritage more evident now than in her teenage years. Subtle magenta energy outlined her form, and her eyes occasionally flashed with the same color when her emotions ran high. Behind her loomed Kevin Levin, his expression caught between worry and the perpetual readiness for trouble that had never quite left him despite years of heroism. Gwen. Ben stood, genuine, nay warmth breaking through the unnatural stillness that had characterized him since arriving on Galvan Prime. Kevin. When did you get here? About 10 minutes ago, Gwen replied, crossing the laboratory to embrace her cousin. She hesitated fractionally upon seeing his violet-tinged eyes before completing the gesture. Grandpa Max told us what happened. We came as soon as we could get away from the Plumbers Academy. Would have been sooner if your cousin hadn't insisted on finishing her lectures for the semester, Kevin added, clasping Ben's hand in a firm grip. His eyes narrowed slightly at the contact. Sensitivity to energy, a lingering effect of his Osmosian heritage. That's different, he commented, clearly sensing the shadow energy. That's one word for it, Ben agreed with a wry smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Gwen stepped back, studying him with the analytical precision she'd perfected as both a sorceress and scholar. Your mana signature has changed. There's a shadow overlaying your natural pattern. It's not suppressing your energy, more like intertwining with it. That aligns with our findings, Elena confirmed, approaching the newcomers. The shadow energy isn't replacing Ben's natural state but enhancing specific aspects of it. Kevin's eyebrows rose in recognition. Elena Validus, thought you disappeared after that nanite queen situation. Quote, I prefer strategic retreat for research purposes, she countered with a hint of defensiveness. The nanites and I reached an understanding eventually. The tension in the air thickened as the room filled with powerful personalities, each with their own history, expertise, and connection to Ben. Asmuth, perhaps sensing the potential for conflict, clapped his hands sharply. Fascinating as these reunions are, we have work to complete. Ms. Tennyson, your anodite perceptions may provide valuable insight into the shadow energy's dimensional properties. Mr. Levin, your experience with energy absorption could help develop containment protocols if needed. The tactic worked, redirecting focus to the problem at hand rather than interpersonal dynamics. Within minutes, Gwen was consulting with K. on magical principles that might relate to interdimensional mathematics, while Kevin examined the containment systems with the practical eye of someone who'd both built and broken out of more than his share of energy prisons. Ben watched them work, a strange detachment settling over him. These were his closest friends and allies, people who had fought alongside him, saved him, been saved by him, yet he felt removed from them. As if observing through a filter that muted emotional connection while heightening tactical awareness. They're worried about you, Elena noted quietly, having approached while the others were distracted. Not just about the shadow energy, but about how you're responding to it. Ben met her gaze, finding neither judgment nor fear in her expression, just understanding. I feel different, he admitted, keeping his voice low, not possessed or controlled, just shifted. Like parts of me that were always background noise are suddenly in focus. Elena nodded, UNC. Anxiously rubbing her arm where the nanites visibly shifted beneath her skin. I understand better than most. When the nanites first bonded with me, I fought against them completely, saw them as invaders to be expelled. It was only when I recognized them as an extension of myself, a new aspect I could direct rather than suppress, that I found balance. Is that what you think I should do? Accept the shadow energy instead of fighting it? I think, she said carefully, that fighting something that's already integrated with your cellular structure and neural pathways is like fighting your own heartbeat. Counterproductive at best, damaging at worst. The shadow energy pulsed in what felt distinctly like agreement, resonating with Elena's assessment in ways that both reassured and disturbed Ben. Before he could pursue the conversation further, alarms blared throughout the facility. Azimuth rushed to a console, his fingers flying across the controls. Interdimensional breach in Sector 7, he reported. Energy signature consistent with Umbral technology. The harvesters? Kai asked, already accessing security feeds. No, Azimuth replied, his expression grim. Something else. Omething coming through rather than merely opening a passage. Ben's decision was instantaneous, the tactical part of his mind, enhanced by the shadow energy, already calculating response options. I need to check it out. We need to check it out, Gwen corrected, magenta energy flickering around her hands. Whatever's happening, you're not facing it alone. Kevin placed his hand on a nearby metal panel, his skin absorbing its properties in a rippling transformation. Like old times, he grinned, though the expression didn't quite hide his concern. I'm coming too, Elena stated, the nanite forming protective patterns across her exposed skin. My scanners might pick up details your systems miss. Kai grabbed a sleek weapon from a nearby rack, standard plumber issue but modified with Galvan enhancements. I've spent 3 days studying this energy. You need my expertise on site. Azimuth observed the rapid mobilization with a mixture of concern and resignation. Take the experimental quantum stabilizers, he instructed, indicating devices no larger than coins on a nearby tray. They may help contain any interdimensional effects. And Tennyson, he added, his voice taking on unusual solemnity. Be cautious with your transformations. Each use of a shadow variant accelerates the integration process. Ben nodded, clipping one of the quantum stabilizers to his belt before heading for the door. The others followed, falling naturally into formation, Gwen and Kevin flanking him, Elena and Kai following slightly behind. The familiar configuration felt right, a tactical arrangement, proven effective through years of confronting cosmic threats. Yet as they rushed toward the dimensional breach, Ben couldn't ignore the whisper of the shadow energy suggesting alternate approaches, ambush rather than direct confrontation. Isolation of the intruder rather than group engagement, exploitation of environmental vulnerabilities rather than reliance on raw power. The suggestions weren't evil, merely pragmatic. Ruthlessly efficient in ways his usual approach sometimes wasn't. Sector 7 was a research quadrant dedicated to advanced physics experiments, the perfect location for an interdimensional incursion. Given the specialized containment systems already in place. When they arrived, Galvan security forces had established a perimeter around a swirling vortex of shadow and violet energy that hovered 3 meters above the floor of the primary research chamber. Status report, Ben demanded, authority settling naturally over him despite the absence of his plumber commander uniform. The Galvan security chief saluted reflexively. Breach occurred approximately 4 minutes ago. Energy readings match nothing in our database, but the quantum signature suggests control. Generation rather than random manifestation. Something is creating this portal deliberately. As if responding to those words, the vortex pulsed, expanding momentarily before contracting to a more defined shape. The shadow energy within Ben responded in kind, a resonance that sent prickling awareness across his skin. Whatever's coming through, it's connected to what happened to Ben, Gwen observed. Her eyes glowing as she perceived energy patterns invisible to others. The signatures are harmonized. Defensive positions, Ben ordered, the tactical part of his mind automatically assigning optimal placement based on each team member's abilities. Elena, ready for energy analysis. Kai, document everything for comparison with artifact data. Gwen, prepare containment barriers. Kevin, you're with me on point. The team moved with practiced efficiency despite years of separation, trust in Ben's strategic instinct overriding any interpersonal tension. They had barely settled into posy. Tian when the vortex collapsed inward with a thunderclap of displaced air, leaving behind a single figure poised in a combat stance. She stood nearly 2 meters tall, her body composed of what appeared to be solid shadow given humanoid form. Armor of dark violet crystal covered vital areas, and her face, beautiful but severe with high cheekbones and almond-shaped eyes, was the only part of her that reflected light normally. Her hair, if it could be called that, moved like tendrils of living darkness, responding to air currents that weren't present in the sealed chamber. Omnitrix wielder, she spoke, her voice carrying harmonic undertones that resonated uncomfortably in the human nervous system. Surrender the Key of Shadows or face judgment from the Umbral Court. Ben stepped forward, positioning himself between the newcomer and his team. The artifact was destroyed days ago. If you're looking for someone to blame, try Lord Umbra. He seems to be the one pulling strings across dimensions. The Shadow Woman's expression shifted to one of surprise, then calculation. You've encountered the exile directly. Impossible. No creature of material space survives direct contact with Lord Umbra without transformation. I'm special that way, Ben replied, carefully gauging her reaction while keeping his distance. The shadow energy within him vibrated with recognition, clearly identifying her as being of the same origin. Who are you, and what do you want with the key? She straightened slightly, pride evident in her posture. I am Esther Lux, Crown Hunter of the Umbral Realm and Executor of the High Shadow's Will. The Key of Shadows was stolen from our dimension by the Exile's servants. Its energy signature led me here. Her gaze fixed on Ben's eyes, noting their violet glow. But I see I am too late. The key has found a vessel. A vessel. Elena stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overriding caution. You mean a host. The artifact was designed to merge with living beings. Esther's attention shifted to Elena, her expression sharpening at the sight of the nanites visible beneath her skin. Not living beings. Wielders of transformation power. The key seeks those who already contain the potential to change form, enhancing that ability while opening pathways between realms. That explains why it reacted to the Omnitrix, Kai realized, documenting the exchange while maintaining a safe distance. It was designed to interface with transformation technology. Designed by whom? Ben pressed, sensing the shadow energy's anticipation of the answer. By the Celestial Sapiens, of course. Esther replied, as if this should have been obvious. Before the sundering of dimensions, when shadow and light existed in balance. The keys were created as bridges between realms, allowing controlled transfer of evolutionary potential across realities. The revelation sent a ripple of shock through the assembled group. Celestial Sapiens, the omnipotent beings whose reality-altering powers had both saved and threatened the universe on multiple occasions, were notoriously non-interventionist, each action requiring consensus among the multiple personalities within a single entity. That doesn't sound like any Celestial Sapien policy I've encountered, Gwen observed, magenta energy still flickering around her hands in readiness. This was before the great debate that paralyzed their kind. Esther explained, her tone suggesting she was simplifying enormously. Before personalities of action and restraint were permanently bound together in single forms. When the Y could still act decisively as a species. Kevin, who had remained uncharacteristically silent, finally spoke. So what happens now? You gonna try to extract this key thing from Ben, or what? Regarded him with the cool assessment of a predator. Extraction is impossible once integration has begun. The vessel either masters the key's power or is consumed by it. Her gaze returned to Ben. Which is why I must determine whether you are worthy of the power you now carry, or if mercy requires your destruction before the shadow corrupts you completely. The clinical way she discussed his potential execution raised Ben's hackles, the shadow energy responding with defensive readiness. Yet something in her manner, the absence of malice, the sense of duty rather than personal animus, kept him from responding aggressively. I've been carrying the Omnitrix for over a decade, he stated calmly. I've wielded power that could destroy galaxies without surrendering to corruption. I think I can handle some interdimensional shadow energy. Esther's expression remained neutral, but something like curiosity entered her eyes. Perhaps, the high shadows will require demonstration, not merely assertion. But first, she raised her hand, shadow energy coalescing around it in patterns similar to the violet lines that appeared during Ben's shadow transformations. I must confirm the key's integration level. Before anyone could react, she released a pulse of concentrated shadow energy directly at Ben. The attack wasn't designed to harm but to provoke response, a test rather than a true assault. The shadow energy within the Omnitrix reacted instantly, rising to meet the pulse without Ben consciously activating the device. For a moment, violet energy surrounded him in a protective cocoon. Shadow tendrils extending outward to absorb Esther's probe. Then, as quickly as it had manifested, the energy receded back into the Omnitrix, leaving Ben standing unchanged physically but with his eyes glowing more intensely. Fascinating, Esther murmured. Partial integration, yet remarkable control. The key responds to your will rather than dominating it. She lowered her hand, her posture shifting from combat readiness to wary assessment. This was unexpected. Yeah, I get that a lot, Ben replied dryly, fighting to maintain his composure despite the rush of power he'd just experienced. The shadow energy had responded to threat without transformation, a capability he hadn't known it possessed. Now, how about we continue this conversation without the energy blasts? I have questions about this umbral realm of yours. And you clearly want to know more about what happened to your key. A faint smile touched Esther's lips, the first genuine emotion she'd displayed. Direct but diplomatic, another unexpected quality in a key vessel. She inclined her head slightly. I agree to an exchange of information, provided your companions maintain their current non-aggressive postures. Ben glanced back at his team, noting the varying degrees of tension and readiness in their stances. With subtle hand signals developed during years of fieldwork, he indicated they should stand down while remaining alert. Gwen lowered her glowing hands reluctantly, while Kevin maintained his metallic form but relaxed his stance. Elena and Kai exchanged glances before taking half steps backward, creating space for negotiation. Let's start with the basics, Ben suggested, gesturing toward a nearby seating area designed for beings of various sizes. What exactly is the Umbral Realm, and how does it relate to Lord Umbra? Esther approached the indicated area with the fluid grace of a natural predator, selecting a seat that gave her clear sightlines to all exits. The Umbral Realm exists in the spaces between dimensions, not a parallel universe but an interstitial reality where shadow energy is the dominant force rather than an aspect of light. Like a dimensional fold, Elena suggested, professional curiosity temporarily overriding caution as she took a seat opposite Esther. A pocket reality created where dimensional boundaries overlap. A simplified explanation, but essentially correct, Esther acknowledged. Our realm has existed since the early universe, populated by beings evolved to harness shadow energy as your species harnesses biochemical processes. And Lord Umbra, Ben prompted, remaining standing despite the available seating. The shadow energy within him seemed to pulse with anticipation at the name. Esther's expression darkened. Once the greatest of our scientists and philosophers, he discovered methods to use shadow energy for transformation beyond our natural abilities, to adopt forms from other dimensions temporarily. But his experiments grew increasingly extreme, attempting permanent alterations that violated the natural order. Let me guess, Kevin interjected from his position near the door. Something went wrong. Big explosion, now he's all shadowy and evil. Your simplification does disservice to a tragedy that shaped our civilization for millennia, Esther replied coldly. Lord Umbra discovered that by harvesting transformation energy from other beings during their death throes, he could achieve more stable and powerful forms. What began as theoretical research became deliberate experimentation on living subjects. A chill settled over the room as the implications became clear. The harvesters, Kai realized. They were his creation. His first success, Esther confirmed. Designed to locate transformation energy across dimensions and extract it efficiently. When the High Shadows discovered his work, they sentenced him to exile beyond the boundaries of the Umbral Realm, cast into the void between all dimensions, a fate considered worse than destruction. Clearly it didn't take, Ben observed. He's not only survived but built enough power to threaten multiple dimensions. The exile was centuries ago, Esther explained. We believed him destroyed by the void energies until recently, when harvesters began appearing in unprecedented numbers across dimensional boundaries. Then the keys of shadow began disappearing from their repositories. Keys, plural, Gwen asked, her scholarly precision catching the detail others might have missed. How many are there? 7 were created by the Celestial Sapiens, Esther replied, each attuned to different aspects of transformation energy. The one that merged with your Omnitrix was the third key, governing physical transformation and adaptation. The tactical implications registered immediately in Ben's mind, enhanced by the shadow energy's processing. And if Lord Umbra acquires all 7, then the barriers between dimensions would become permeable to his will, Esther stated flatly. He could extend his harvesting operations across all realities simultaneously, creating what he calls the Great Transformation, a culling of all beings he deems unworthy of evolution. Harvested to fuel the ascension of those he selects to survive. Silence settled over the group as they absorbed the scale of the threat. It wasn't merely a single world or dimension at risk, but potentially all of reality, a multiversal extinction event orchestrated by a being who viewed genocide as evolutionary necessity. Well, Ben finally said, the shadow energy within him surging with determination rather than fear. It wouldn't be the first time I've had to save every universe simultaneously. The casualness with which he referenced such cosmic-scale heroism drew a startled look from Esther. You speak as if such things are routine. For Ben, kind of are, Kevin replied with a hint of pride beneath his typical nonchalance. Universal destruction, reality rewriting, timeline collapse, just Tuesday for Team Tennyson. Though usually with less interdimensional shadow energy involved, Gwen added dryly. Esther studied Ben with new intensity, reassessment evident in her gaze. Perhaps the key's selection was not as random as I assumed. In the umbral realm, legends speak of keys finding worthy vessels in times of greatest need, beings whose nature resonates with the key's purpose. And what exactly is the third key's purpose? Ben asked, uncomfortably aware of the shadow energy's heightened response to her words. Adaptation and survival, Esther replied simply. The ability to evolve beyond current limitations to meet existential threats. To transform not merely form but potential. The conversation might have continued in this philosophical vein, if not for a sudden alert from Alina's scanner, the device emitting a high-pitched warning tone. She glanced at the readings, her expression shifting to alarm. Multiple dimensional breaches forming in orbit, she reported. Energy signatures consistent with harvester vessels, but larger than previous encounters. Much larger. Ben's tactical mind shifted immediately to defense mode, priorities rearranging with crystalline clarity. Azimuth needs to activate planetary shields. Gwen, contact Grandpa Max. We need plumber reinforcements. Kai, gather your research data. If we need to evacuate, that information goes with us. As the team moved to execute his instructions, Ben turned back to Esther. I'm guessing those aren't friends of yours. Harvester primes, she confirmed grimly. Elite, hunter units designed to track key energy across dimensions. They sensed our conversation and my use of shadow energy to test you. Ben nodded, decision already made. Then you're with us for now. We have common enemies and complementary knowledge. After we deal with this threat, we can discuss your assessment of my worthiness. A brief smile touched Esther's lips. Pragmatic prioritization. An other quality the High Shadows would find intriguing. She inclined her head in acceptance. I will fight alongside you against the Harvesters. Their destruction serves the Umbral Court's purposes as well as your own. Azimuth's voice interrupted via the facility's communication system. Planetary shields engaging, but the dimensional signatures indicate the Harvesters are materializing partially inside the shield perimeter. Conventional defenses will have limited effectiveness. Their phase shifting through the shields, Elena realized, studying her scanner. Using the same dimensional frequency manipulation they employ for their physical forms. Ben's mind raced through options, the shadow energy enhancing his strategic thinking with insights into dimensional vulnerabilities he wouldn't normally consider. We need to disrupt their phase coherence. If they can't maintain partial existence in both dimensions simultaneously, they'll either have to commit fully to our dimension or retreat to their own. The quantum stabilizers, Kai suggested, indicating the devices Azimuth had provided. If we could modify them to broadcast their effect rather than maintain localized fields. I can help with that, Elena offered, the nanites on her arm already reconfiguring into tool-like appendages. The nanites can interface with the stabilizers, using them as templates to generate larger field effects. You'd need a power source orders of magnitude beyond what those devices contain, Esther observed, her tone suggesting respect for the concept despite its apparent impossibility. Gwen's eyes lit with realization. Unless we use the Omnitrix as a power source. It's already generating shadow energy compatible with Umbral tech. If Elena's nanites can create the interface, I could transform into feedback and channel the energy directly, Ben finished, the plan crystallizing. But Azimuth warned that each shadow transformation accelerates the integration process. Is saving Galvan Prime worth the risk of further integration? Kevin asked bluntly, cutting to the heart of the matter. The question hung in the air for a heartbeat before Ben answered. Yes, if the integration continues, We'll deal with that problem after we ensure there's still a planet left to work from. With the decision made, they moved with coordinated efficiency. Elena extracted the quantum stabilizer's core components, her nanites analyzing and replicating their structure while Kai provided calculations for the necessary amplification. Gwen established a communication link with Plummer forces in orbit, coordinating defensive measures to contain the harvesters until the disruption field could be activated. Kevin absorbed the properties of a nearby power conduit, preparing to serve an emergency backup generator if needed. Esther observed their teamwork with undisguised interest, occasionally offering insights into harvester vulnerabilities based on umbral knowledge. Though CL, early still assessing Ben's worthiness to wield the key, her combat expertise and dimensional understanding proved immediately valuable. The modification is ready, Elena announced after 20 intense minutes of work. The quantum stabilizer had been transformed into a more complex device, nanite structures extending from its core in fractal patterns. It'll need direct contact with the Omnitrix during transformation to establish the power connection. Ben nodded, taking the device from her. Their fingers brushed during the exchange, and he noticed the nanites briefly respond to the proximity of the shadow energy. Silvery patterns shifting toward the contact point before returning to normal. Interesting, Elena murmured. The nanites recognize the shadow energy as compatible with their adaptation protocols. They're attempting to establish communication pathways. Something to explore later, Ben replied, though he filed the information away for future consideration. The tactical part of his mind, enhanced by the shadow energy, automatically cataloged potential applications of nanite shadow energy integration. Harvester primes entering atmosphere, Gwen reported from her communication station. Plummer defense grid engaging, but their phase shifting is rendering most weapons ineffective. We need to get to the central transmission array, Kai interjected. The Modify ED stabilizer needs planet-wide broadcast capability. I know a shortcut, Ben decided, activating the Omnitrix. Everyone gather close. As his team moved into proximity, Ben selected a transformation he hadn't used in years, Clockwork. The Chronosapian form with temporal manipulation abilities. The shadow energy responded eagerly, enveloping him in darkness streaked with violet before revealing his transformed state. Shadow Clockwork retained the mechanical aspects of the original form, but with dramatic alterations. The brass-colored body was now obsidian with purple energy visible through seams in the living metal. The key-like protrusion on his head had transformed into a crown of temporal gears, each turning at different rates, and his eyes glowed with concentrated shadow energy. Time manipulation enhanced by dimensional shifting, Esther observed with something like awe. The key truly has found exceptional compatibility with your transformation matrix. Let's hope it works the way I think it will, Ben replied, his voice resonating with mechanical undertones. Everyone maintained physical contact, as his team formed a circle, each touching his shadow-enhanced mechanical form. Ben focused on the temporal manipulation abilities unique to Chronosapiens. Standard Clockwork could slow, accelerate, or reverse time in limited areas. Shadow Clockwork, he discovered, could do something far more interesting. Create localized temporal bridges between spatial points, effectively teleporting by briefly connecting two locations through accelerated time passage. The world around them blurred, colors smearing into streaks of light as they traversed the distance to the central transmission array instantaneously from an external perspective. The sensation was disorienting for everyone except Ben, who perceived the journey with perfect clarity, not as instant transportation but as incredibly accelerated movement along a precise path. They materialized on the transmission array's primary platform, a massive structure atop the highest spire in the Science Citadel. The sky above was chaos, Harvester Prime vessels, each 3 times the size of the scout ships they'd encountered previously, phased in and out of normal space as they descended through Galvan Prime's atmosphere. Plummer defense vessels engaged them with limited effect, weapons fire passing harmlessly through partially phase-shifted hulls. The stabilizer needs direct connection to the transmission core, Kai instructed, already moving toward the central console. Elena, can the nanites establish the interface? Elena nodded, extending her arm toward the console. The nanites flowed from her skin in a silvery stream, forming complex connections between the modified stabilizer and the transmission system. Connection established, but we still need the power source. Ben reverted from shadow clockwork, the transformation collapsing in a swirl of violet energy that left him momentarily dizzy. Shadow energy within the Omnitrix pulsed strongly, clearly affected by the recent transformation. Your eyes, Gwen noted with concern. The violet color is more pronounced. No time to worry about that now, Ben replied. Selecting another transformation. Feedback should be able to channel the shadow energy directly into the stabilizer. Wait, Esther interjected, stepping forward with uncharacteristic urgency. The shadow variant of your energy conductor form will draw power directly from the umbral realm during the channeling process. The integration will accelerate exponentially. You have a better idea? Kevin demanded, gesturing toward the increasingly chaotic aerial battle. Esther hesitated, internal conflict visible on her normally composed features. I can provide an Alt-ER native connection to shadow energy, one that doesn't require furthering your integration with the key. But it would create a temporary bond between us that the Umbral Court might consider inappropriate. Define inappropriate, Ben prompted, already suspecting the answer based on the shadow energy's reaction to her proximity. In our realm, sharing shadow energy directly is reserved for THOs who have completed formal courtship rituals, she explained with surprising diffidence. It would be seen as presumptuous for a crown hunter to establish such intimacy with an unproven vessel. Under different circumstances, the awkwardness of the moment might have been amusing. As it stood, with Harvester primes descending and planetary defenses failing, the decision was simple. I'll risk your court's disapproval if you will, Ben stated directly. How do we establish this connection? Esther moved closer, shadow energy gathering around her outstretched hand. Place the Omnitrix in contact with my energy matrix. I will channel power through you to your device without allowing further integration of the key. The procedure sounded straightforward enough, though the shadow energy Ethan Ben reacted with surprising intensity to the prospect, not resistance but anticipation, as if this connection had significance beyond tactical necessity. As Ben extended his arm, bringing the Omnitrix into proximity with Esther's shadow-wreathed hand, he was acutely aware of his team watching with varying degrees of concern and curiosity. The moment their energies connected, he understood why. The sensation transcended physical contact. It was recognition on a fundamental level, shadow energy acknowledging shadow energy across dimensional boundaries. Through the connection, Ben glimpsed fragments of the umbral realm itself, a world of perpetual twilight where shadow was substance and light was the ephemeral visitor. He saw beings of living darkness moving through crystalline cities, civilization built on principles completely alien yet strangely compelling. More immediately relevant, he felt Esther's power flowing through him into the modified stabilizer, the energy following waves created by Alina's nanites into the transmission system. The shadow energy from the Omnitrix responded by creating a harmonic resonance, amplifying the effect without further integration. Broadcasting now, Elena announced, her voice seeming distant through the haze of dimensional awareness. Field expanding at exponential rate. The effect was visible in the sky above them. As the Quantum disruption field expanded outward from the transmission array, the Harvester Prime vessels lost their phase coherence. Massive ships suddenly fully materialized in normal space, their hulls solidifying into vulnerable matter. Plumber weapons that had passed harmlessly through them moments before now struck with devastating effect, energy beams and projectiles tearing through suddenly tangible structures. Some vessels, caught in the transition, attempted to retreat completely to their home dimension, only to find that pathway disrupted by the specific frequency Elena had calculated. Trapped fully in normal space, unable to phase shift or retreat, the Harvester Primes found themselves outmatched by the combined Plumber and Galvan defense forces. As the battle turned decisively in their favor, Ben gradually became aware that the connection with Esther had revealed more than just glimpses of the umbral realm. Impressions of her thoughts and emotions lingered, her surprise at finding an umbral being capable of wielding shadow energy with such intuitive skill, her conflict between duty to the umbral court and growing assessment of Ben as potentially worthy, her curiosity about his world and his companions. When the connection finally ended, both stepped back with the slight disorientation of those who have shared something unexpectedly intimate. The shadow energy within the Omnitrix pulsed once before settling into its normal rhythm, seemingly satisfied rather than frustrated by the exchange. That was Not what I expected, Ben admitted, finding his voice after a moment. Nor I, Esther agreed, her composure returning gradually. Your affinity for shadow energy exceeds anything documented in our records of previous key vessels. The Umbral Court will find this most significant. Before Ben could respond, Alina's scanner emitted another alert. The Harvester primes are retreating, those that survived the defense forces. The dimensional disruption field is holding. We've won this round, Gwen observed, though her tone suggested she understood the temporary nature of their victory. But they'll adapt their approach for the next attempt. Agreed, Kai said, already documenting readings from the transmission array. We need to understand exactly how the shadow energy interfaces with the harvesters, dimensional manipulation. There might be more permanent countermeasures we can develop. As the immediate crisis subsided, Ben became aware of a subtle but significant change in the shadow energy's behavior within him. The connection with Esther had somehow stabilized its integration. The violet energy no longer pulsing erratically but flowing in smoother patterns through his system. His tactical thinking remained enhanced, but the aggressive impulses that had occasionally surfaced seemed muted, balanced by other aspects. Something's different, he noted aloud, drawing the attention of both Elena and Esther. Elena approached with her scanner, nanites extending sensory appendages. The shadow energy integration has shifted to a more stable configuration. The chaotic elements have harmonized considerably. She glanced at Esther with professional curiosity. Your energy connection appears to have catalyzed a balancing effect. Unexpected but not unprecedented, Esther explained after a moment's consideration. In the Umbral realm, Nushish, Addo adepts often require harmonizing connections with established practitioners to stabilize their developing abilities. The process normally takes months of careful training, however. Ben's never been one for doing things the normal way, Kevin commented with a hint of his old sardonic humor. The observation drew reluctant smiles from the group, tension easing as the immediate threat receded. Even Esther's perpetually serious expression softened slightly, her assessment of Ben and his team visibly shifting toward something approaching respect. Azimuth's voice interrupted through the communication system. The harvester threat has been neutralized temporarily. All personnel return to secure facilities for debriefing. Tennyson, bring your associate to my primary laboratory immediately. Her insights regarding Umbral technology may prove crucial. Always with the orders, never with the, thank you for saving my planet again, Ben muttered, though there was more fondness than genuine irritation in his tone. As they prepared to return to Azimuth's laboratory, Ben noticed Kai watching him with an expression he couldn't quite interpret, scientific curiosity mixed with something more personal. She had been observing his interactions with both Elena and Esther with increasingly thoughtful attention. Your team functions with remarkable efficiency despite apparent interpersonal complexity, Esther noted quietly as they began the journey back. In the Umbral realm, such effectiveness would suggest deep harmonization of shadow energies, a characteristic of bonded hunting units or familial clusters. We've been through a lot together, Ben explained, though he suspected she was perceiving dynamics beyond the obvious professional coordination. The shadow energy seemed to enhance awareness of subtle emotional currents, highlighting connections and tensions he might otherwise have overlooked. Esther nodded, accepting the explanation at face value while clearly filing away observations for future reference. Her assessment of his worthiness to wield the key continued, but her approach had shifted from potential executioner to curious evaluator, progress, if not complete acceptance. The return to Azimuth's laboratory felt like crossing a threshold, not merely physical movement but transition to a new phase of understanding. The shadow energy within Ben had stability. Enough for him to think more clearly about its implications, while the threat represented by Lord Umbra and his harvesters had crystallized from abstract danger to concrete strategic problem. More complex were the personal dynamics emerging among his team. Alina's scientific detachment occasionally slipped, revealing genuine concern about his condition that transcended professional interest. Kai's analytical approach to the shadow energy couldn't quite mask her lingering personal connection to him, complicated by years of separate paths suddenly converging. Gwen and Kevin provided the grounding of family and longtime friendship, their concern transparent but expressed through action rather than words. And now Esther added an entirely new dimension, a representative of a realm he carried within him through the key. Her assessment of his worthiness tied to the fate of multiple realities. The shadow energy responded differently to each of them, recognizing patterns of connection and potential that Ben himself was only beginning to perceive. As they entered the laboratory, Azimuth stood waiting on his elevated platform, surrounded by holographic displays showing data from the recent confrontation. His expression was unreadable, but the intensity of his focus suggested conclusions already forming. It appears the integration has accelerated despite precautions, the Galvan genius noted without preamble, gesturing to readings of Ben's current condition. However, the pattern has shifted from chaotic expansion to structured harmonization. Fascinating. That would be my contribution, Esther stated, stepping forward with formal precision. I am Esther Lux, Crown Hunter of the Umbral Court. I established a temporary harmonic connection to stabilize the key's integration process. Azimuth's eyes narrowed with intense interest. A native of the Umbral realm. Your presence confirms several theoretical models regarding interdimensional transit. The harmonization technique you employed, does it have lasting effects, or merely temporary stabilization? In normal circumstances, permanent stabilization requires multiple harmonizing sessions over an extended period, she explained. However, this vessel, she paused, correcting herself. Tennyson's affinity for shadow energy is unprecedented. The effect appears more substantial than anticipated. Ben's not just compatible with the key, Elena interjected, her nanites displaying analytical patterns on her arm. He's actively directing its integration process at a cellular level. The Omnitrix itself seems to be facilitating the adaptation rather than merely hosting the shadow energy. Which suggests, Kai added, building on Elena's observation, that the merger isn't corruption as we initially feared, but evolution. The Omnitrix doing what it was ultimately designed to do, adapt. Azimuth stroked his chin thoughtfully. An interesting hypothesis. The Omnitrix was created to promote understanding between species. But its fundamental architecture involves controlled DNA manipulation and transformation. Perhaps the shadow energy is simply revealing capabilities that were always latent within its design. The conversation continued in this analytical vein, each specialist contributing perspectives from their areas of expertise, Elena on the bioenergetic aspects, Kai on the archaeological and historical context, Gwen on the magical and dimensional implications, Kevin on the practical applications of enhanced transformation abilities, and Esther on the nature of shadow energy itself. Ben listened, absorbing their insights while feeling the shadow energy respond to concepts that resonated with its nature. The tactical part of his mind, enhanced by the integration, began assembling a strategic framework for addressing the threat Lord Umbra represented, not merely reactive defense but proactive countermeasures that would require mastery of his new capabilities. There's something we're overlooking, he finally interjected, interrupting a technical exchange between Azimuth and Elena regarding quantum field stabilization. Lord Umbra isn't just collecting keys for abstract power. He's building towards something specific. This great transformation, Esther mentioned. We need to understand exactly what that entails if we're going to counter it effectively. Esther turned toward him, approval evident in her expression. A worthy observation. In the Umbral realm, historical records suggest the Exile's original research focused on creating permanent pathways between dimensions, not merely portals for travel but conduits for energy transfer on a cosmic scale. Energy harvesting across multiple realities simultaneously, Kai realized, the implications dawning with horrifying clarity. He wouldn't need to physically invade each dimension if he could establish energy extraction points throughout the multiverse. The keys would serve as anchors, Elena continued, her scientific mind racing ahead. Fixed points to stabilize the dimensional bridges while the harvesters operated as collection mechanisms. And my Omnitrix with the integrated key would be. Ben began, already suspecting the answer. The perfect control mechanism, Azimuth finished grimly. A device specifically designed to interface with and manipulate genetic material across species, now enhanced with interdimensional capabilities. In the wrong hands, it could coordinate energy extraction across billions of realities simultaneously. The room fell silent as the scale of Lord Umbra's ambition became clear. Not merely conquest or destruction, but harvesting, systematic extraction of transformation energy from countless beings across the multiverse, fueling whatever ascension he envisioned for those he deemed worthy of survival. So that's why the harvesters targeted me specifically, Ben concluded, the shadow energy within him pulsing with what felt like confirmation. The Omnitrix was always the intended vessel for the key, the perfect control mechanism for Lord Umbra's harvesting operation. But something went wrong, Gwen observed, her analytical mind finding the inconsistency. If that was the plan, why would Lord Umbra seem surprised when you resisted the integration? Why tell you about your potential as his herald if that was the original intention? Because I wasn't supposed to maintain control, Ben realized. Pieces falling into place with the shadow energy's assistance. The key was meant to overwhelm my consciousness, creating a vessel loyal to Lord Umbra rather than an independent wielder. When that failed, he shifted to recruitment rather than domination. Which means, Kevin added with unusual insight, that you're more of a threat to his plans now than if the key had never reached the Omnitrix at all. The tactical implications crystallized in Ben's mind with perfect clarity. He'll come after me directly, either to convert or destroy me. The harvester attacks were just preliminary testing, gauging my capabilities and the level of resistance he'd face. Then we must prepare accordingly, Esther stated, her posture shifting subtly to battle readiness. In the Umbral realm, we have protocols for defending key vessels during their integration period. With modifications for your unique circumstances, similar protections could be established here. More than protection, Ben decided. The shadow energy resonating with growing determination. We need to take the offensive, find the remaining keys before Lord Umbra does, understand exactly how they function together, and develop countermeasures specific to his harvesting technology. A multidimensional scavenger hunt while fighting off interdimensional parasites and dealing with your ongoing transformation. Kevin summarized with a raised eyebrow. Sounds like a normal Tuesday for us after all. Despite the gravity of the situation, the quip drew reluctant smiles from several team members. Omen of familiar camaraderie amid cosmic threats, exactly the kind of gallows humor that had sustained them through previous world-ending crises. We'll need to establish a secure operations base, Gwen suggested, already thinking in terms of practical logistics. Somewhere defensible against dimensional incursions but with access to necessary research facilities. The plumber headquarters in the null void might work, Ben considered. It already exists partially outside normal spacetime, which could make it more difficult for harvesters to locate. Too isolated from potential allies, Kai countered. And the null void's dimensional properties might interfere with our research into the key's functions. I have another suggestion, Elena offered, the nanites on her arm forming a holographic projection of a structure hidden within an asteroid field. My research facility in the Ceres belt. It's already equipped with interdimensional sensors and containment systems from my work with the nanites. With Galvan enhancements, it could serve our purposes effectively. Azimuth studied the projection critically before nodding. The location has strategic advantages, remote enough for security but accessible through multiple routes. I can provide necessary equipment and coordinate with plumber forces for additional defense measures. I will need to report to the Umbral Court regarding these developments, Esther stated. But I can return with resources that may assist in tracking the remaining keys. Their energy signatures resonate at specific frequencies that our sensing technology is calibrated to detect. The discussion continued, plans taking shape with the efficient coordination of experienced crisis managers. Throughout the exchange, Ben felt the shadow energy with him responding differently to each person's contributions, recognizing Elena's scientific precision, Kai's historical context, Gwen's magical insight, Kevin's practical approach, Esther's specialized knowledge, and Azimuth's genius innovations as complementary aspects of a unified response. More subtly, he noticed the energy responding to emotional undercurrents as well, Elena's concern beneath her scientific detachment, Kai's lingering personal connection despite professional focus, Esther's growing reassessment of his worthiness, Gwen's protective instincts toward her cousin, Kevin's steadfast loyalty beneath casual remarks. The shadow energy didn't merely enhance tactical awareness but emotional intelligence as well, highlighting connections and potential that might otherwise remain obscured. As preparations began for transfer to Elena's facility, Ben found a moment of relative privacy to examine the Omnitrix directly. The device appeared unchanged externally, but he could feel the difference in its operation, smoother, more responsive, integrated with his thoughts in ways that transcended the original interface. The shadow energy didn't feel like an invader anymore but an enhancement. revealing capabilities that had always existed in potential if not actuality. Remarkable adaptation, Azimuth observed, having approached silently while Ben was focused on the device. The Omnitrix was designed to evolve alongside its wielder, but I never anticipated this particular path of development. Is that approval I hear? Ben asked with a hint of his old irreverence. Cautious observation, the Galvan corrected, though without his usual sharpness. The shadow energy integration presents both unprecedented opportunities and concerning risks. Your control thus far exceeds my statistical projections. But the process is far from complete. You think I should continue the integration rather than trying to reverse it? Ben realized, reading between the lines of Azimuth's careful assessment. I think, Azimuth replied with unusual directness, that attempting reversal at this stage would likely cause more harm than benefit. The shadow energy has begun integrating not merely with the Omnitrix but with your neural pathways, cellular structure, and genetic expression. Separation now would be traumatic, with uncertain outcomes. So I keep going forward and hope I don't lose myself in the process. Azimuth's expression softened fractionally. You have repeatedly demonstrated exceptional adaptability, Tennyson. Of all beings I might have selected to wield the Omnitrix, your capacity to integrate new abilities while maintaining your core identity remains your most remarkable quality. If any creature in the galaxy can master this transformation rather than being mastered by it, evidence suggests it would be you. Coming from the normally critical Galvan, this qualified as effusive praise. Ben felt the shadow energy respond with something like satisfaction, as if Azimuth's assessment confirmed its own evaluation of their compatibility. Besides, Azimuth added with a hint of his usual acerbic tone, your team appears determined to ensure you remain yourself regardless of physical or energetic transformations. Their combined expertise presents a formidable counterbalance to potential corruption. Ben glanced across the laboratory where final preparations were underway. Elena and Kai worked seamlessly together despite having just met, their different specialties complementing each other as they packaged research equipment. Gwen coordinated with Plum Beer forces while Kevin secured transport arrangements, their years of partnership evident in their efficient division of tasks. Esther observed it all with the careful assessment of someone cataloging both strengths and vulnerabilities. Though her posture had relaxed considerably from her initial combat readiness. There's something special, Ben agreed, feeling the shadow energy's acknowledgement. Of each connection, different in nature but equally significant in its recognition. As are you, Azimuth stated with uncharacteristic directness before turning away. Try not to destroy my Omnitrix while saving multiple dimensions. Again, quote, as preparations continued for departure to Elena's facility, Ben found himself drawn to the window overlooking Galvan Prime's gleaming cityscape. The shadow energy within him had stabilized enough that he could think more clearly about what lay ahead, not merely the tactical challenges of confronting Lord Umbra and securing the remaining keys, but the personal journey of integration with the shadow energy itself. Each transformation into a shadow variant revealed new aspects of both the alien forms and his own nature, evolutionary paths and potentials that had always existed but remained unexplored until now. The process wasn't corruption but revelation, uncovering layers of possibility that extended beyond his previous understanding of both the Omnitrix and himself. The realization brought both exhilaration and sobering responsibility. If the shadow energy enhanced existing potentials rather than imposing foreign elements, then mastering it ain't confronting aspects of himself he'd previously kept contained or denied. The capacity for ruthless efficiency, the instinct toward dominance, the willingness to make harsh judgments when necessary. Lord Umbra had recognized this potential and sought to exploit it, attempting to turn Ben into a vessel for his multiversal harvesting operation. Instead, he'd inadvertently created his most significant obstacle, a wielder of shadow energy who understood its nature but rejected its corruption, capable of using its power without surrendering to its darker impulses. As the sun set over Galvan Prime, casting long shadows across the crystalline spires, Ben felt the shadow energy within him responding to the shifting balance of light and darkness, not opposing forces but complementary aspects of a unified reality. Whatever challenges lay ahead in confronting Lord Umbra and mastering the Key of Shadows, he would face them not by denying the darkness but by integrating it, becoming not what Lord Umbra intended but what the multiverse needed, a hero capable of wielding shadow without being consumed by it. The journey had only just begun, but for the first time since the artifact had merged with the Omnitrix. Ben felt genuine confidence that the path forward, though dangerous, led not to corruption but to evolution, transformation in the truest sense, becoming more fully himself rather than losing his identity to the shadow. With renewed determination, he turned back to join his team, ready to confront whatever darkness awaited, both within and beyond the dimensions. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, The Tetraman Alliance. Alina's research facility hung in the shadow of Ceres, the asteroid's craggy surface providing natural camouflage for the deceptively sophisticated installation. From a distance, it resembled just another mining outpost, the kind of unremarkable operation that dotted the belt by the thousands. Only upon approach did its true nature become apparent, a fortress of SC. Ions built to withstand both conventional and interdimensional threats. Ben stood at the observation deck, watching as plumber vessels established a defensive perimeter around the facility. 3.ys had passed since their departure from Galvan Prime, 3 days of relative quiet that everyone recognized as temporary. The shadow energy within him had settled into a more stable rhythm, pulsing in harmony with his natural biorhythms rather than fighting against them. His violet-tinged eyes had become a permanent feature, though the intensity fluctuated with his emotional state. "Quite the operation you've built out here," he observed as Elena joined him at the viewport. "Not exactly the neighborhood I expected to find you in. Isolation has its advantages when your research occasionally punches holes between dimensions," she replied, the nanites beneath her skin shifting in subtle patterns that Ben was beginning to recognize as emotional indicators. "Fewer civilians to evacuate when experiments go sideways. Smart thinking." He turned from the viewport to study her more directly. "How long have you been out here?" 3 years, give or take." She leaned against the railing, silver-streaked dark hair falling across her face before she tucked it behind her ear. "After I gained control of the nanites, I needed space to understand what I'd become. The plumbers wanted to keep me under observation, politely. Of course, but still a cage. Azimuth offered this alternative." Azimuth. Ben couldn't hide his surprise. The first thinker rarely took personal interest in individual cases, especially those involving potentially dangerous technology. Alina's lips curved into a wry smile. He said something about preferring to monitor interesting technological anomalies from a reasonable distance. I think he saw research potential in how the nanites integrated with my biological systems. That sounds more like him. Ben paused, choosing his next words carefully. "The nanites, they're completely under your control now." The question touched on delicate territory, but Elena didn't flinch from it. She extended her arm, the nanites flowing to the surface in complex geometry. See patterns before resolving into a perfect miniature replica of the Omnitrix. "We reached an understanding," she explained as the replica dissolved back into her skin. "They need a host. I need their capabilities. Symbiosis rather than parasitism. I think they evolved just as I did through our bond." Ben nodded, recognizing parallels to his own situation with the shadow energy. Adaptation instead of dominance. Exactly. Elena studied him with clinical precision that couldn't quite mask genuine concern. "How's your integration progressing?" "The shadow energy seems more stable, but readings still show fluctuations during emotional peaks. It responds to intensity," Ben confirmed, feeling the shadow energy pulse slightly at being the subject of conversation. "Not just negative emotions like anger or fear, but any strong feeling. Yesterday it reacted when I was laughing at something Kevin said, not as dramatically as during combat, but noticeable." "Fascinating," Elena murmured, the scientist in her temporarily eclipsing other concerns. "The nanites respond similarly to emotional states, though they're more attuned to fear and pain. Self-preservation programming I haven't completely recalibrated." Their conversation might have continued in this analytical vein if not for the facility's communication system activating with Kai's voice. "Ben, Elena, we've got something. Central lab, as soon as possible." The urgency in her tone had them both moving immediately, navigating the facility's curved corridors with practiced efficiency. Alina's research center had quickly adapted to serve as their operational headquarters, its modular design allowing reconfiguration for their specialized needs. The central laboratory, originally designed for nanite research, now housed there. Interdimensional tracking equipment and analysis systems. They found Kai standing before a holographic display with Gwen, Kevin, and Esther. The projection showed a three-dimensional map of the solar system, focused on a sector near Jupiter's orbit where anomalous energy readings pulsed in irregular patterns. "We've got dimensional disturbances forming," Kai explained without preamble as they entered. Similar signature to harvester portals, but with differences in quantum resonance patterns. "Not harvesters," Esther confirmed, her shadow form more distinct in the dimly lit laboratory. E-energy harmonics suggest umbral technology, but modified for extended material space operation. Exile forces rather than standard harvesters. Ben studied the readings, the shadow energy enhancing his perception of subtle patterns in the data. They're searching for something specific. The energy distribution is too precise for random harvesting operations. Probably, Kevin suggested, arms crossed over his chest. His recent stint absorbing specialized alloys had left faint metallic patterns visible just beneath his skin, a reminder that Ben wasn't the only one whose powers left permanent marks. Or more specifically, you and that key thing. No, Ben realized, the shadow energy providing unexpected insight. They're hunting another key. The pattern matches artifact recovery operations, not pursuit protocols. Esther's expression sharpened with interest. Your perception of umbral energy signatures continues to evolve. You are correct. These readings suggest excavation rather than pursuit. Jupiter has no solid surface for conventional archaeology, Gwen observed, her practical mind identifying the inconsistency immediately. Unless they're not digging for physical artifacts, Kai countered, entering commands that enhance the resolution of certain readings. Look at these gravitational distortions. They're probing dimensional fault lines near Jupiter's gravity well. Areas where the fabric between realities thins naturally. Elena leaned closer to the display, nanites extending from her fingertips to interface directly with the system. They're using the planet's magnetic field as an amplifier for dimensional resonance scanning. Efficient, if unconventional. Lord Umbra wouldn't waste resources on standard retrieval operations, Esther added, her tone suggesting grudging professional respect. If the exile is committing forces to this location, another key is almost certainly present. Ben felt the shadow energy pulse in confirmation, resonating with the distant readings in a way that transcended standard sensor technology. It's there, he stated with certainty that surprised even him. I can feel it, similar to the energy I absorbed, but with different harmonics. The fourth key, Esther identified, watching Ben with increased interest. Governing energy manipulation and conversion across dimensional boundaries. The tactical implications registered immediately. If Lord Umbra gets that key, his ability to harvest transformation energy would increase exponentially, Ben realized. We need to secure it before his forces can. With what? Kevin challenged pragmatically. We've got a handful of plumber ships against whatever those readings represent. Based on past experience, I'm guessing we're outnumbered. Significantly, GW.N confirmed after analyzing the sensor data more thoroughly. I count at least 27 distinct energy signatures consistent with vessel-sized objects. If they're comparable to the harvester primes we encountered at Galvan Prime. We'd need a fleet, Ben finished, mind already racing through strategic options. Or an alternative approach entirely. I might be able to help with that, A new voice interjected from the laboratory entrance. All heads turned to find Rook standing in the doorway, his expression as professionally composed as ever despite the unusual circumstances. Magister Tennyson sends his regards, along with tactical support he believed might prove useful for your current situation. Rook. Ben's genuine pleasure at seeing his former partner broke through the assured control he'd maintained since the shadow integration began. When did you arrive? Approximately 17 minutes ago, Rook replied with characteristic precision. I would have reported immediately. But your grandmother Verdona insisted on performing what she called a thorough security assessment of the facility before allowing anyone to disembark. Grandma Verdona is here, Gwen asked, surprise and delight evident in her voice. Indeed, along with several other individuals Magister Tennyson believed might contribute valuably to your mission. They await introduction in the primary docking bay. Ben exchanged glances with his team, curiosity temporarily overriding the urgency of the Jupiter situation. Grandpa Max rarely committed significant resources without good reason. And the mention of Verdona, an anodite of tremendous power who seldom involved herself in plumber operations, suggested he considered the shadow energy threat exceptionally serious. Lead the way, Ben decided, the tactical part of his mind already integrating potential new assets into their operational planning. Kai, Elena, keep monitoring those dimensional disturbances. We need real-time updates on any changes. The docking bay occupied the heart of the facility, a cavernous space currently housing 3 plumber vessels alongside Elena's specialized research craft. As they entered, Ben immediately spotted Verdona, his anodite grandmother's humanoid form unmistakable even from a distance, her energy signature pulsing with magenta power that contrasted sharply with his own violet-tinged aura. Less expected was the massive figure standing beside her, a female Tetraman in modified battle armor that incorporated both traditional tribal elements and advanced technological components. Even among her 4-armed species, she stood tall, her posture radiating authority and battle readiness. Luma Red Wind, Ben identified with surprise, the shadow energy responding with heightened awareness to the Tetraman princess, or rather, former princess, based on the modifications to her traditional regalia. Wasn't expecting to see you again after our last encounter. Tennyson. Luma's deep voice carried across the docking bay as she turned to face them. Her crimson skin bore new scars since their last meeting, including a prominent one that bisected her lower right eye, giving her features an even more formidable aspect. You look different, more interesting. The simple observation carried layers of meaning that the shadow energy helped Ben interpret, genuine curiosity beneath professional assessment. Respect tempered with caution, and something like recognition of a worthy opponent who had continued evolving as she had. Life's been eventful, he replied diplomatically as they approached. What brings you here? Last I heard, you were set to take the Tetraman throne after your father. A complex expression crossed Luma's features, pride mingled with something harder to identify. Plans change. The throne proved restrictive. I found building my own path more satisfying than following one laid by tradition. Luma commands the most effective independent security force in 3 sectors, Rook explained, filling in the considerable gaps in her modest statement. Her fleet specializes in interdimensional threat containment, precisely the expertise your current situation requires. My darling Benjamin, Verdona interrupted, floating forward with the ethereal grace unique to anodites. Her energy form shimmered with barely contained power as she circled Ben, E.X.A. mining the shadow energy with evident fascination. What a deliciously complex transformation you've undertaken. The interdimensional harmonics are absolutely exquisite. It wasn't exactly voluntary, Grandma, Ben clarified, though he couldn't help smiling at her enthusiasm. Verdona approached even potentially catastrophic energy phenomena with the appreciation of a connoisseur rather than the caution of a pragmatist. The best transformations rarely start that way, she replied with a dismissive wave. It's what you do with them that matters. And this shadow energy, the potential is simply scrumptious. Esther stepped forward, her shadow form seeming to intensify in Verdona's presence as if responding to the concentrated mana energy. You perceive the key's true nature, she observed with evident surprise. Few beings outside the umbral realm recognize shadow energy as creative rather than corrupting. Verdona laughed, the sound like wind chimes in a dimensional storm. My dear shadow child, when you've existed as pure energy for as long as I have, you learn that categories like creative and corrupting are merely perspectives, not absolutes. Your umbral energy is fascinating, constrained potential seeking expression through transformation. Not so different from anodite energy, merely inverted. The casual insight cut to the heart of what Ben had been experiencing, not corruption but inversion. Familiar powers and aspects of himself viewed from a different angle, revealing facets that had always existed but remained unexplored. As enlightening as this metaphysical discussion is, Luma interjected with the practical impatience characteristic of her species, there are more immediate concerns. Your communication mentioned dimensional incursions near Jupiter requiring tactical response. My fleet stands ready, but effective deployment requires specific intelligence. Ben appreciated the direct approach, the shadow energy resonating with Luma's no-nonsense attitude. We've detected what we believe is another artifact similar to the one that merged with my Omnitrix, he explained. Lord Umbra's forces are already moving to secure it. We need to reach it first. Lord Umbra, Luma repeated, her expression hardening with recognition. My fleet encountered his dimensional parasites 3 cycles ago near the Andromeda boundary. Formidable Oppen, Ents with unconventional phase-shifting capabilities. You've fought harvesters before? Gwen asked with surprise. Fought and defeated, Luma confirmed without boasting, simply stating fact. Though not without cost. Their ability to exist partially in multiple dimensions simultaneously presents unique tactical challenges. We've developed countermeasures for their phase shifting, Elena offered. Quantum stabilizers that force them to fully materialize in normal space, rendering them vulnerable to conventional weapons. Luma nodded approvingly. Efficient. My engineers created similar technology after our first encounter. Though with less sophistication than I suspect yours possesses. She turned to Ben, assessing him with the critical eye of a battlefield commander. Your shadow transformation, does it grant advantages against these interdimensional threats? The shadow variants of my aliens can perceive and interact with beings in dimensional transit, Ben confirmed. Among other enhancements. Show me, Luma requested, or rather commanded, her tone making it clear this was professional assessment rather than curiosity. Ben glanced at the others, noting various reactions, Verdona's eager anticipation, Esther's careful observation, Gwen's subtle concern, Kevin's casual interest, and Rook's professional attention. The shadow energy pulsed in response to the challenge, eager to demonstrate its capabilities after days of relative containment. All right, he agreed, activating the Omnitrix. But we should move to a more open area. Some of the shadow variants have increased mass compared to their standard forms. The group relocated to a nearby training chamber designed for Elena's nanite combat exercises. The reinforced space provided ample room for transformation while monitoring systems would record data for later analysis. Ben selected his transformation carefully, choosing Diamond Head, a form whose enhanced shadow variant he'd explored only briefly during previous testing. The transformation process had grown more fluid with practice, shadow energy integrating seamlessly with the Omnitrix's functions. Violet light engulfed him, darkness and energy, intertwining before resolving into his transformed state. Shadow Diamond Head stood nearly 10 feet tall, obsidian crystalline structure laced with pulsing purple energy lines that followed fractal patterns through his massive frame. Unlike standard Diamond Head's uniform crystalline composition, this variant featured varying crystal densities, some areas nearly transparent, others completely opaque, creating a complex internal structure that maximized both strength and energy conductivity. Impressive, Luma acknowledged, circling him with professional assessment rather than alarm. The Denzi Tai variation provides superior structural integrity while maintaining mobility. Combat effective. The adaptations go beyond physical structure, Ben explained, his voice resonating through his crystalline form with harmonic undertones. He extended one arm, demonstrating how the shadow-infused crystals could shift between solid and semi-phased states. I can match the harvester's dimensional frequency, hitting them even when they're partially shifted between dimensions. To demonstrate, he generated a crystal construct that pulsed with shadow energy, its structure momentarily becoming translucent before solidifying again. The precision control represented significant progress from his earlier transformations, where the shadow variants had enhanced raw power at the cost of fine manipulation. The integration has stabilized considerably, Esther observed, her own shadow form responding to the energies Ben manifested. Your control of dimensional resonance frequencies exceeds what most Umbral adepts achieve after years of training. Adaptation accelerated by necessity, Verdona added with knowing appreciation. The shadow energy recognizes the urgency of your situation and is conforming to your needs rather than following standard integration protocols. Quite remarkable. Luma, less interested in the metaphysical aspects than practical applications, focused on tactical assessment. Can all your transformations achieve this dimensional frequency matching? Each shadow variant has different specializations, Ben explained, reverting to human form with a surge of violet energy. The transformation left him momentarily lightheaded but without the extreme fatigue that had characterized earlier shifts. Some excel at perception across dimensions, others at physical interaction with phase-shifted objects. Still others at energy manipulation across dimensional boundaries. Specialized tactical units rather than uniform capabilities, Luma translated into military terminology she found most relevant. Efficient for coordinated operations against dimensional threats. Exactly, Ben confirmed, appreciating her practical understanding. With your fleet providing conventional firepower and my team handling specialized interdimensional aspects, we could create an effective response to Lord Umbra's forces. Luma considered this, her forearms crossing in Vari Aus contemplative positions, a Tetraman body language indicator of strategic assessment. A temporary alliance would be mutually beneficial, she finally concluded. My fleet requires your specialized knowledge of these dimensional artifacts and countermeasures against harvester technology. You need our firepower and experience with large-scale tactical operations against unconventional threats. The directness of her proposal, free from political maneuvering or hidden agendas, resonated with the tactical clarity the shadow energy had been enhancing in Ben's thinking. Agreed, he replied with matching straightforwardness. Full information sharing, coordinated operation planning, equal partnership. Luma's expression shifted to one of grudging approval, or perhaps respect. You've grown since our last encounter, Tennyson. Less talk, more substance. We've all evolved, Ben acknowledged, the shadow energy highlighting subtle changes in Luma herself, not just physical scars but a deeper maturity. Authority earned through action rather than inherited position. The girl who had once pursued him through adolescent Tetraman tradition had become a formidable commander in her own right. Her journey as transformative as his own in different ways. Then let us plan, Luma declared, already turning toward the exit with expectation that others would follow. My flagship contains tactical planning systems designed specifically for interdimensional operations. We should transfer your intelligence data immediately and develop a comprehensive approach before the situation at Jupiter deteriorates further. As the group moved to follow Luma's suggestion, Ben felt the shadow energy responding differently to each person, recognition of Verdona's mana-based power, resonance with Esther's umbral nature. Acknowledgement of Luma's tactical strength, familiarity with his core team's various capabilities. The integration continued to enhance his perception of others not merely as individuals but as components of a complex operational unit, each bringing unique strengths to the collective effort. The transition to Luma's flagship, appropriately named Sovereign Fist, revealed much about how the former princess had transformed her life since rejecting the traditional path to the Tetraman throne. The vessel combined brutal efficiency with surprising sophistication, traditional Tetraman design principles adapted with technologies from dozens of species. Her crew, notably, included not only fellow Tetramans but representatives from at least 7 different species, each selected for specialized capabilities rather than political considerations. The ship's tactical center impressed even Gwen, whose standards for organizational efficiency were notoriously high. 3-dimensional mapping systems projected real-time intelligence from multiple dimensions simultaneously, while specialized sensor arrays monitored dimensional boundaries for signs of thinning or instability. Your technology is remarkably advanced for a private security force, Elena observed as her nanites interfaced with compatible systems to transfer their Jupiter intelligence data. Necessity drives innovation, Luma replied without elaboration, though the shadow energy helped Ben perceive deeper meaning. Battles fought, lessons learned through costly experience, adaptations made to overcome unconventional threats. Her fleet hadn't merely encountered harvesters once, as she'd implied, but had been actively hunting them across multiple sectors, perhaps driven by motives beyond mere security contracts. As their combined intelligence created a comprehensive tactical picture, the situation near Jupiter resolved into clearer focus. Lord Umbra's forces had established 17 distinct rational sites along dimensional fault lines in Jupiter's upper atmosphere, each protected by harvester vessels and specialized equipment designed to extract objects from interdimensional space. They're creating a dimensional fishing net, Esther explained, indicating the energy pattern created by the combined operations. The fourth key exists partially in normal space and partially in dimensional interstices. This extraction pattern would draw it fully into material reality at a predetermined collection point. Here, Ben identified, pointing to an anomalous energy concentration near Jupiter's Great Red Spot. The shadow energy guided his perception, recognizing patterns invisible to standard sensors. That's where the key will materialize if their extraction succeeds. Then that's our primary target, Luma determined. marking the location in the tactical display. My fleet can engage their perimeter forces while a specialized strike team breaches their defenses at the collection point. We'll need to disrupt their dimensional extraction equipment at multiple sites simultaneously, Kai added, studying the technical specifications they'd gathered. Otherwise, they'll why redirect the process to compensate for any single point of failure? A coordinated multi-target operation, Gwen summarized, her tactical mind quickly assessing requirements. We don't have enough personnel to strike 17 targets simultaneously, even with Luma's fleet. We don't need to strike all targets directly, Ben realized, the shadow energy highlighting strategic vulnerabilities in the extraction pattern. The system depends on precise dimensional harmonization across all sites. If we can disrupt the resonance frequency at these 3 primary nodes, he indicated specific locations on the display, the entire extraction pattern will collapse. Luma studied his suggestion with professional assessment before nodding approval. Efficient. Minimal force requirements with maximum effect. 3 strike teams targeting resonance nodes while the main fleet engages their defensive perimeter. I should lead the primary strike team, Ben stated, feeling the shadow energies. Eagerness for direct confrontation with umbral technology. The key will respond to my presence due to resonance with the one I already carry. Agreed, Luma replied without hesitation, respecting the tactical necessity despite potential risk to a key asset. I will command the second strike team. The third requires someone with both combat capability and technical expertise to recalibrate the disruption frequencies as needed. That would be me, Elena volunteered, the nanites visibly shifting beneath her skin in preparation. The nanites can interface directly with their equipment, foresee inharmonic disruption even if they attempt to compensate. As they continued developing the operational plan, Ben noticed subtle shifts in team dynamics, Luma and Elena quickly establishing professional respect despite having just met. Esther observing Tetraman tactical methodologies with careful attention, Verdona floating at the periphery, seemingly distracted but actually absorbing every det. Ale with the perspective of a being who had witnessed countless conflicts across centuries. More interesting was how the shadow energy responded to this evolving team structure, not with the territorial defensiveness he might have expected, but with something like satisfaction, as if recognizing the assembly of complementary capabilities as enhancement rather than competition. The tactical clarity it provided continued to evolve, helping him perceive not just vulnerabilities in enemy positions but optimal configurations of friendly assets, matching capabilities to requirements with intuitive precision. When the planning session concluded, they had developed a comprehensive operation with primary, secondary, and contingency approaches for each phase. Luma's fleet would deploy within 3 hours, positioning for simultaneous strikes against all target sites. The mission had clear objectives: disrupt the extraction process, secure the 4th key before Lord Umbra's forces could retrieve it, and gather intelligence on their dimensional technology for future countermeasures. As the team dispersed to prepare for their respective roles, Ben found Luma studying him with the direct assessment characteristic of her species. "You've changed significantly," she observed without preamble. "Not merely the shadow energy, but your approach to command. More decisive, less reliant on improvisation." "Experience teaches painful lessons," he replied, matching her directness. "Some more painful than others." Luma nodded, understanding without requiring elaboration. "After I rejected the throne, many called me traitor to tradition. They could not understand that following the established path would have diminished what I could contribute. My father eventually recognized this, though not before blood was spilled between us." Quote, the personal revelation surprised Ben. Tetramans rarely spoke of family conflicts to outsiders, considering such matters internal to clan honor. That Luma's heard this suggested she perceived him differently than she once had. "Is that how you got the scar?" he asked, gesturing to the prominent mark bisecting her lower right eye. "Yes." The trial of succession turned contentious. A grim smile briefly crossed her features. "Father bears matching marks on 2 of his arms. We reached understanding through combat, as is our way. He now rules Koros with renewed strength, having faced true challenge rather than ceremonial transition. And you command your own fleet, free from royal obligations," Ben concluded, appreciating the symmetry of their resolution. "Seems you found your path after all." "As have you," she replied, gesturing to the violet energy occasionally visible in his eyes. We each transform according to our nature, Tennyson. The difference between evolution and corruption lies in maintaining core purpose while adapting form. The insight struck Ben as remarkably similar to what he'd been discovering through his Integratio. With the shadow energy, transformation revealing essential nature rather than obscuring it. Before he could respond, alarm signals activated throughout the vessel, tactical displays shifting to alert status. Energy spike at primary extraction site, a Petrosapian officer reported from his station. Dimensional boundaries thinning at accelerated rate. They've begun the final extraction phase ahead of schedule. Time-sensitive opportunity, Luma assessed immediately, already moving toward the command platform. They must have detected our fleet's approach, accelerating the operation to spit. Increased risk of dimensional instability. We need to launch now, Ben agreed, the shadow energy surging with urgency. Even partial extraction of the key could provide them capabilities we can't allow. Luma nodded, issuing commands with practiced efficiency. All strike teams to deployment stations immediately. Fleet to battle formation Delta. Accelerate timeline to immediate execution. The organized chaos of a military vessel transitioning to combat operations surrounded them as crew members rushed to stations and systems reconfigured for engagement. Ben activated his communicator, connecting with his scattered team members. Change of plans, we're accelerating to immediate deployment. Primary strike team assemble at Launch Bay 3. Gwen, coordinate with Verdona on Magical Co. Countermeasures for dimensional instability. Kevin, you're with Luma's strike team. Your absorption abilities might be useful against their equipment. Acknowledgements came swiftly, his team adapting the changed circumstances without hesitation. Within minutes, Ben found himself aboard a specialized insertion craft alongside Esther, Rook, and two of Luma's elite Tetraman security specialists. The compact vessel was designed for stealth approach and rapid deployment, its systems incorporating phase-shifting technology similar to what the Harvesters employed. Approaching primary target zone, the pilot reported. A four-armed Tetraman female whose scarred features suggested extensive combat experience. Dimensional disturbance increasing. Interference with navigation systems at 27% and rising. Ben studied the tactical display, the shadow energy enhancing his perception of the dimensional anomalies surrounding Jupiter's Great Red Spot. What had appeared as random turbulence to standard sensors revealed itself as deliberate patterns to his shadow-enhanced vision, a massive extraction matrix drawing the fourth key from its interdimensional location into normal space. They've almost completed primary resonance calibration, Esther observed, her shadow form rippling with tension. The key will begin materialization within minutes. Then we interrupt before they reach that threshold, Ben decided. Already activating the Omnitrix. I'll create an entry point while their sensors are focused on the extraction process. The rest of you follow immediately and secure the collection platform. He selected Big Chill, the Necrophrygians' intangibility offering ideal capabilities for their initial breach. The transformation enveloped him in shadow and violet energy, resolving into a form that retained the basic configuration of Big Chill but with dramatic alterations. Shadow Big Chill's wings resembled tears in reality rather than physical membranes, revealing glimpses of the umbral realm within their darkness. His body remained insectoid but composed of condensed shadow given physical form, temperature dropping around him as he drew thermal energy fro. His surroundings to fuel dimensional manipulation rather than mere intangibility. Impressive adaptation, Rook observed, his expression revealing the slight discomfort even longtime allies felt witnessing the shadow variants. The dimensional manipulation capabilities appear significantly enhanced. More than you know, Ben replied, his voice carrying ethereal harmonics as if emerging from multiple dimensions simultaneously. I can perceive their extraction matrix completely now. They've created 17 precisely calibrated dimensional anchors surrounding a central collection point. Disrupting any three should collapse the entire structure. Proceed as planned, Esther confirmed after studying the extraction pattern through her own umbral senses. We will follow once you've secured the initial breach point. Ben nodded, then phased through the vessel's hull without further discussion. The shadow variant of Big Chill didn't merely pass through solid matter as the standard foe. Did but actually shifted partially into the dimensional interstices where the umbral realm connected with normal space. This allowed him to perceive both realities simultaneously as he approached He extraction operation. Jupiter's swirling atmospheric gases on one side, the crystalline structures of umbral technology on the other. Lord Umbra's forces had established their primary collection place at form within a relatively stable region of Jupiter's upper atmosphere, using the planet's massive electromagnetic field to amplify their dimensional extraction equipment. The platform itself was a marvel of interdimensional engineering, a structure existing simultaneously in normal space and the dimensional boundary regions, its configuration constantly shifting to maintain optimal positioning relative to the fourth key's location. Harvesters patrolled the perimeter, their insectoid forms phase-shifting between dimensions as they monitored for threats. More concerning were the humanoid figures at the platform's center, being similar to Esther in composition but with fundamental differences in energy signature. Where Esther's shadow form pulsed with ordered harmony, these entities radiated chaotic, fragmented patterns indicative of forced evolution rather than natural development. Exile forces, Ben realized, recognizing them as Lord Umbra's direct servants rather than merely allied species. Umbral beings corrupted through experimental transformation. The shadow energy provided insight beyond mere identification, helping him perceive vulnerabilities in their unstable forms. Like Esther's natural umbral composition, these beings maintained their cohesion through continuous energy consumption, a weakness that could be exploited with the right approach. Ben remained in dimensional transit, observing the operation while formulating his attack strategy. At the platform's center, a swirling vortex of purple and black energy marked the extraction point where the fourth key would eventually materialize. 17 energy beams connected this vortex to distant extraction nodes, creating the dimensional fishing net Esther had described during planning. The moment for observation passed as alarm signals activated across the platform. Luma's fleet had engaged the harvester vessels protecting the outer extraction nodes, drawing attention and resources away from the central collection point as planned. With defenses temporarily thinned, Ben executed his breach maneuver. Shadow Big Chill's temperature manipulation abilities allowed him to create a localized dimensional frost effect, literally freezing the boundary between normal space and dimensional interstices to create a stable transition point for his team to follow. As he materialized on the platform, 3 harvesters immediately converged on his position, phase-shifting to optimal attack configurations. Ben responded with a blast of shadow-infused cold that didn't merely lower temperature but temporarily crystallized dimensional boundaries, forcing the harvesters into solid state and preventing their phase shifting. The creatures screeched in alarm, suddenly vulnerable in ways their natural abilities usually prevented. The breach point stabilized as Esther emerged first, her shadow form flowing through the dimensional tear with practiced grace. Rook followed with tactical precision, Proto-Tool Al, ready configured for wide-spectrum energy dispersion to counter phase-shifting targets. The Tetraman security specialists came last, their massive forms surprisingly agile as they secured the immediate perimeter. Extraction process at 70% completion, Esther reported after assessing the energy vortex. The key has begun partial materialization. Ben reverted from Shadow Big Chill, the transformation collapsing in controlled fashion rather than the disorienting surge that had characterized earlier reversions. The shadow energy remained active within him, enhancing his perception of the dimensional boundaries surrounding the platform. "We need to disrupt the primary resonance nodes," he instructed, indicating 3 critical junctions where energy beams connected to the central vortex. "Esther, take the northern node. Rook, eastern. I'll handle the western junction. Tetraman team, secure our position against counterattack." As they moved to execute this plan, the exile forces at the platform's center finally responded to the intrusion. 5 humanoid shadow beings turned from their operation of the extraction equipment, their forms rippling with unstable energy as they assessed the threat. Unlike Esther's clearly defined features, these entities had only approximations of faces, shifting masks of shadow with glowing violet eyes that lacked pupils or definition. "Vessel of the third key." One addressed Ben directly, its voice distorted as if passing through multiple dimensional filters simultaneously. "Lord Umbra anticipated your interference. Your presence serves his purpose rather than disrupting it." The statement triggered immediate tactical reassessment, the shadow energy highlighting potential traps or secondary objectives beyond the obvious extraction operation. Before Ben could fully analyze the implications, the exile forces attacked, not with conventional weapons but with directed pulses of corrupted shadow energy designed to disrupt the third key's integration with the Omnitrix. Ben dodged the initial assault, activating the Omnitrix even as he moved. He selected Swampfire, the Methanosian's regenerative capabilities and control OV. Plants offering versatility for the confined space of the platform. The shadow variant that emerged retained the basic humanoid plant structure but with significant alterations, the vegetable matter. Composed of shadow-infused biological material that constantly shifted between solid and semi-gaseous states. Flames that normally burned orange now blazed violet, consuming dimensional energy rather than oxygen. "Secure those resonance nodes," Ben commanded, his voice carrying harmonic undertones through his transformed vocal apparatus. "This is definitely a trap, but we still need to disrupt the extraction." Rook and Esther acknowledged, continuing toward their assigned targets while adjusting for the new threat assessment. The Tetraman security team engaged harvesters attempting to flank their position. 4 armed combat specialists proving remarkably effective against the phase-shifting creatures once they understood their movement patterns. Shadow Swampfire engaged the exile forces directly, violet flames creating barriers that disrupted their dimensional manipulation abilities. The corrupted shadow beings responded with surprising coordination, their attacks focusing on the Omnitrix symbol on Ben's chest rather than attempting to disable his transformed state completely. They're targeting the third key specifically, Ben realized, using regenerative capabilities to rep air damage from a particularly focused assault. They don't want to destroy it, they're trying to extract it from the Omnitrix. The tactical implications crystallized immediately. Lord Umbra wanted both keys intact. Not merely to prevent Ben from interfering with the fourth key's extraction. This wasn't just a defense of their operation but an attempt to retrieve the third key while Ben was isolated from his broader support network. As this understanding formed, the energy vortex at the platform's center pulsed dramatically, the extraction process accelerating beyond its previous rate. Within the swirling darkness, a crystalline object began taking shape, similar to the pyramid that had merged with the Omnitrix, but formed of interlocking tetrahedral segments that constantly reconfigured I.N. patterns too complex for normal perception to follow. "The fourth key is materializing ahead of schedule," Esther called from her position near the northern resonance node. "They're overloading the extraction matrix intentionally." "It's not just extraction," Ben responded, the shadow energy providing insight into their opponent's strategy. "They're using our presence, specifically the third key's resonance, to accelerate the process. We're not interrupting their operation, we're enhancing it." The revelation forced immediate strategic recalibration. Disrupting the resonance nodes would no longer be sufficient if the extraction had already passed critical threshold. They needed to prevent the fourth key from fully materializing in normal space, which required direct intervention at the central vortex itself. "Change of plans," Ben commanded, shifting his attack toward the platform's center. Rook, Esther, continue disruption attempts to slow the process. Tetraman team, maintain perimeter security. I'm going to attempt direct containment of the key before materialization completes. The shadow energy surged as he approached the vortex, responding to the fourth key's proximity with increasing resonance. Shadow Swampfire's control over plant matter evolved into manipulation of dimensional boundaries themselves, shadow-infused vines extending into the vortex to create containment structures around the partially materialized key. The exile forces redoubled their efforts to reach him, recognizing the threat to their primary objective. 2 broke through Rook's defensive perimeter, their shadow forms flowing across the platform with liquid grace before reforming into humanoid configurations flanking Ben's position. The keys were meant to unite, Vessel, one stated, its voice penetrating directly into Ben's consciousness rather than traveling through air. Lord Umbra merely accelerates the inevitable convergence. Why fight what you yourself will eventually seek? Because I choose how and when I use this power, Ben replied, maintaining focus on containing the fourth key despite the distraction. Umbra wants to control, I want to protect. Kind of a fundamental difference in approach. A temporary perspective, the exile dismissed. The shadow reveals truth eventually. All vessels come to understand their purpose. Before Ben could respond, the vortex collapsed inward with explosive force. dimensional energies converging as the fourth key completed its materialization. The resulting shockwave knocked everyone on the platform off their feet, disrupting both defensive positions and the extraction equipment simultaneously. When the dimensional distortion cleared, the fourth key hovered at the platform's center, a complex crystalline structure composed of interlocking tetrahedra that constantly reconfigured themselves in patterns that hurt the eyes to follow directly. Unlike the third key's obsidian coloration, this artifact shimmered with purplish transparency. Internal energies visible as they flowed through its geometric structure. For one suspended moment, no one moved, umbral forces and Ben's team alike temporarily paralyzed by the key's completed manifestation. Then everything happened simultaneously. The exile forces lunged toward the artifact, shadow forms extending to envelop it. Esther released a pulse of concentrated umbral energy designed to disrupt their movement. Rook fired a specialized containment field from his proto-tool, and Ben, acting on intuition enhanced by the shadow energy, reverted to human form before immediate. Ely transforming again, this time into feedback, the energy-manipulating conductoid. Shadow feedback emerged with dramatic alterations to the standard form. The plugs and conductors that normally adore Ned the conductoid's body had transformed into dimensional anchor points, connections not merely to electrical energy but to the fabric of reality itself. The single antenna had split into three, each attuned to different dimensional frequencies, while the body itself seemed to exist at the intersection of normal space and the umbral realm, constantly shifting between solid and energy states. Ben extended his transformed limbs toward the fourth key, dimensional conductors establishing direct connection to the artifact's energy matrix. Unlike the third key's violent merger with the Omnitrix, his connection created a controlled energy exchange, shadow feedback absorbing and redirecting the dimensional power without allowing full integration. "It's too unstable for direct absorption," Ben announced, his voice distorted by the massive energies flowing through his transformed body. "I'm redirecting it to a containment configuration." The shadow energy within him worked in perfect harmony with his transformed state. Using the third key's integrated power to establish compatible resonance with the fourth. Rather than attempting to absorb the new key directly, Ben created a dimensional pocket, a stable intersection between normal space and the umbral realm where the artifact could exist without fully manifesting in either dimension. The exile forces recognized the threat to their objective immediately, converging on Ben's position with increasing desperation. "The keys cannot be separated," their leader hissed, shadow form expanding to envelop Ben's transformed body. "Lord Umbra has decreed their convergence." "Lord Umbra isn't here," Ben replied, maintaining concentration despite the assault. "I am." With those words, he completed the dimensional pocket, securing the fourth key in a state of controlled suspension, neither fully in normal space nor the umbral realm, but accessible from both under specific conditions he controlled. The containment wasn't permanent, but it would prevent immediate acquisition by either side while they retreated from this increasingly unstable platform. The exile leader howled in frustration, its shadow form destabilizing as it attempted to breach the dimensional pocket. The other corrupted umbral beings joined the assault, their combined power threatening to overwhelm even shadow feedback's enhanced capabilities. "We have what we came for," Ben called to his team, voice strained by the effort of maintaining both his transformation and the dimensional pocket. "Execute Extraction Plan Alpha." Rook responded immediately, activate ing a device Azimuth had provided specifically for emergency dimensional transitions. The technology created a controlled breach similar to what Luma's ships used for rapid deployment, but specifical L.Y. calibrated to Ben's shadow energy signature for targeted extraction. "Tetraman team, cover our retreat," Rook ordered as the dimensional breach stabilized. "Esther, assist Ben with key containment during transition." The platform shuddered violently as Jupiter's atmospheric turbulence combined with dimensional instability created by the extraction process. With the fourth key no longer providing stability to the interdimensional structure, the entire operation began collapsing in cascading failure, exactly what their original disruption plan had intended to trigger, now occurring naturally as a consequence of Ben's intervention. Esther reached Ben's position, her natural umbral composition allowing her to interface directly with the dimensional pocket he'd created. "I can stabilize the containment during transit," she offered, shadow energies extending to support his efforts. But we must leave immediately. This platform will collapse completely within minutes. Ben nodded. Mainta, Eining shadow feedbacks form as they began moving toward the extraction point. The Tetraman security team formed a defensive perimeter, their massive forms creating a living barrier against the increasingly desperate exile forces. Rook coordinated their movement, Prototool configured to maximum dispersion mode to counter the shadow attacks. The retreat to the dimensional breach proceeded with Ractus efficiency until an unexpected surge of energy from Jupiter's electromagnetic field disrupted the platform's remaining stabilizers. The resulting gravitational distortion sent equipment and personnel tumbling across suddenly tilting surfaces, separating team members and disrupting careful formation. Ben found himself isolated from the others, still maintaining the dimensional pocket containing the fourth key while 3 exile forces converged on his position. Shadow Feedback's energy manipulation abilities allowed him to counter their initial attacks, but maintaining the pocket while defending himself divided his concentration dangerously. "Surrender the keys, vessel," the exile leader demanded, its form stabilizing into more coherent shape as it prepared a concentrated assault. "Your resistance merely delays the inevitable ascension Lord Umbra has prepared for worthy beings across all dimensions. If I had $1 for every megalomaniac who used inevitable to describe their completely preventable evil plan," Ben retorted, channeling shadow energy through his conductors to create defensive barriers, "I could have retired years ago." The exile leader's response was a focused beam of corrupted shadow energy that struck with precision at the connection point between Ben's transformed body and the dimensional pocket. The attack didn't attempt to breach the pocket directly but to sever Ben's control over it, a sophisticated tactic that revealed deeper understanding of dimensional energies than expected from a mere servant. Pain lanced through Ben's consciousness as the connection strained but held. The shadow energy within him responded to the threat by enhancing the bond, drawing power directly from the third key's integration with the Omnitrix to maintain control over the fourth key's containment. The unexpected energy surge created a feedback loop between the two keys, exactly what the exile leader had intended. The dimensional pocket destabilized momentarily, its boundaries fluctuating as the fourth key resonated with the third. For a critical moment, both artifacts existed in perfect harmonic alignment, creating a combined energy signature power full enough to breach dimensional barriers far beyond their current location. "Yes," the exile leader hissed, its form expanding as it absorbed ambient energy from the resonance. "Lord Umbra comes." A new dimensional tear formed above the platform, not the controlled breach Rook had created for their extraction, but something far more ominous. Within the darkness beyond, a presence gathered, immense, ancient, and radiating the same corrupted shadow energy that animated the exile forces, but magnified beyond comprehension. "Ben." Esther's voice cut through his pain-hazed awareness as she fought her way toward his position. "The keys are creating a summons beacon. Lord Umbra approaches directly." The tactical implications registered through his strained concentration. This had been the true trap all along. Not merely attempting to acquire the fourth key or reclaim the third, but to create a momentary resonance between them that would allow Lord Umbra himself to breach the dimensional barriers separating him from normal space. With desperate clarity, Ben recognized there was no time for tactical retreat. The dimensional tear was expanding rapidly, the presence beyond growing more defined with each passing second. Soon Lord Umbra would materialize directly, bringing power beyond what their current resources could possibly counter. The shadow energy within Ben surged with determination rather than fear, providing insight that transcended conventional tactical options. There was one possibility, dangerous, potentially catastrophic for himself, but capable of disrupting the dimensional resonance before Lord Umbra could complete his transition. "Get everyone out," Ben commanded, voice strained as he prepared for what must come next. "I'm collapsing the pocket directly into the breach. That would release both keys' energy simultaneously into an unstable dimensional corridor," Esther protested, immediately grasping the implications. "The feedback through your connection could be fatal." "Better than letting Lord Umbra through," Ben replied with grim determination. "Go. Get the others to safety." Esther hesitated only momentarily before nodding with reluctant understanding. As a crown hunter of the Umbral Court, she recognized necessary sacrifice when she saw it. With swift efficiency, She rejoined the others, coordinating immediate extraction through Rook's dimensional breach while explaining the situation. Ben focused his remaining concentration on the task at hand. Shadow Feedback's energy manipulation abilities pushed beyond their normal limits. Rather than maintaining the dimensional pocket as stable containment, he began a controlled collapse, directing the fourth key's immense power directly into the tear Lord Umbra was attempting to widen. The Xyle forces realized his intent too late, their attacks growing frantic as they attempted to interrupt the process. "You cannot stop the inevitable," their leader shrieked, shadow form disintegrating at the edges as the platform's remaining stability failed completely. Lord Umbra transcends dimensional barriers. He will find another path. Maybe, Ben acknowledged, completing the final calculations for his desperate gambit. But not today, and not through me. With those words, he released the dimensional pocket's containment in a precisely calculated surge, channeling the fourth key's power directly into Lord Umbra's approaching presence while simultaneously drawing energy from the third key integrated with the Omnitrix. The opposing forces created a dimensional shear wave, a catastrophic disruption in the fabric of reality that collapsed both breaches simultaneously. The resulting energy backlash struck Ben with devastating force, overwhelming even Shadow Feedback's enhanced conductive capabilities. Pain beyond description engulfed his consciousness as dimensional energies tore through his transformed body, the connection between the keys briefly united then violently severed. In the final moment before consciousness fled completely, Ben felt something unexpected, the shadow energy within him not diminishing but transforming, responding to the catastrophic energy release. By evolving into more complex configuration, the third key's integration deepened, extending beyond the Omnitrix into his very cellular structure as if recognizing the sacrifice attempted and adapting to prevent complete destruction. Then darkness claimed him entirely, his transformed body falling through collapsing dimensional spaces as Jupiter's swirling atmosphere reclaimed the disintegrating platform and all who remained upon it. Awareness returned gradually, consciousness reassembling itself from scattered fragments. Ben perceived his surroundings first as vague impressions: sterile environment, medical equipment, subdued lighting, before specific details resolved into coherent understanding. He was in a medical bay, advanced life support systems monitoring vital signs that displayed on holographic readouts beside the bed. More significant was what he perceived beyond normal senses, dimensional layers usually invisible to human perception now clearly evident, shadow energy flowing through barriers between realities like water through semi-permeable membranes. His awareness extended beyond the immediate environment, perceiving energy signatures of nearby beings with unprecedented clarity. "He's regaining consciousness," Alina's voice registered, her presence identified not just through sound but through the unique energy pattern of her nanite-infused biology. Neural activity spiking across all monitored regions. Quote, "About time." Kevin's familiar gruffness provided grounding, his Osmosian energy signature distinct among the others present. "Been 3 days of watching monitors beep. Getting seriously boring." "Ben." Gwen's voice came closer, her anodite heritage blazing in his enhanced perception like magenta fire contained within human form. "Can you hear us?" Loudly, Ben managed, voice rough from disuse, "and in approximately 3 additional dimensional frequencies I wasn't accessing before." He opened his eyes to find his team gathered around the medical bed, Gwen and Kevin nearest. Concern evident beneath attempted casual postures, Elena monitoring medical readouts, nanites shifting beneath her skin in response to changing data, Kai studying him with scientific precision tempered by personal investment, Rook maintaining professional composure despite clear relief, Esther observing with the careful assessment of someone witnessing unprecedented phenomena, Luma standing slightly apart. Respect evident in her formal posture. "Welcome back to the land of the living," Verdona declared, floating into view with characteristic dramatic timing. "Though, living, might require some qualification given your current energy configuration." "What happened?" Ben asked, attempting to sit up before discovering his body responded sluggishly to commands. As if relearning basic movement patterns. "The last thing I remember is collapsing the dimensional pocket into Lord Umbra's breach." "You succeeded in disrupting his transition," Esther confirmed. He dimensional shear wave collapsed both the extraction operation and his attempted manifestation simultaneously. "An impressive tactical decision," if suicidally reckless. Did we secure the fourth key? Ben pressed, focusing on mission objectives before personal condition. Yes and no, Kai answered, activating a holographic display above his bed. The key wasn't destroyed in the collapse, but it wasn't fully contained either. It's currently in a state of dimensional flux, neither fully in normal space nor completely in the umbral realm. The display showed the fourth key's current condition, its crystalline structure intact but constantly shifting between various dimensional states, never fully materializing in any single reality. Energy readings indicated active power signature but without stable configuration for either side to utilize effectively. A stalemate, Ben concluded, the shadow energy providing tactical assessment. Neither we nor Lord Umbra can access it until it stabilizes in one dimension or another. Correct, Elena confirmed, the nanites on her arm forming analytical patterns as she monitored his condition. But that's secondary to your current situation. Your interaction with both keys simultaneously has accelerated certain processes we were previously monitoring. The integration, Ben realized, finally taking stock of his own condition beyond immediate physical limitations. The shadow energy had changed dramatically, no longer a separate force merging with his natural systems but fundamentally integrated throughout his cellular structure, neural pathways, and energy configuration. The third key has completed primary integration, Esther explained with something like wonder in her voice. Your confrontation with Lord Umbra and interaction with the fourth key triggered adaptive acceleration beyond anything documented in umbral records. You are now fully bonded with the key of shadows, not merely carrying it, but embodying its functions. Which means what, exactly? Kevin asked with characteristic bluntness, cutting through technical details to practical implications. It means, Verdona interjected before others could respond, that our dear Benjamin now exists simultaneously across multiple dimensional planes. His physical form anchors in normal space, but his energy extends into the umbral realm and several dimensional interstices between. Quite the evolutionary leap, especially for a species as dimensionally limited as humans typically are. Ben absorbed this information, the shadow energy, now inseparable from his consciousness, providing context beyond what words could convey. He wasn't merely hosting interdimensional power anymore, he had become a nexus point between realities, his very existence bridging dimensional boundaries in ways previously impossible without specialized technology or inherent abilities like Verdona's anodite nature. So I'm not fully human anymore, he stated, voicing the implicati. Others seemed reluctant to address directly. You're still Ben Tennyson, Gwen insisted immediately, her hand finding his with reassuring pressure. Your core consciousness, memories, values, everything that makes you who you are, remains intact. You've just expanded beyond conventional human limitations. Your genetic structure maintains human baseline with significant modifications, Elena added with scientific precision. Similar to how your DNA carries potential for transformation through the Omnitrix, but now permanently expressing certain interdimensional adaptations regardless of transformed state. The shadow has awakened what was always possible within you, Esther explained, her perspective as an umbral being offering unique insight. The key merely revealed evolutionary potential that existed in latent form, accelerating development that might have taken centuries through conventional paths. Luma, who had remained silent throughout these explanations, finally stepped forward. What matters is not classification but capability, she stated with Tetraman directness. Your tactical effectiveness remains uncompromised despite physiological alterations. In battle, function supersedes form. The practical assessment, so characteristic of Luma's warrior culture, provided grounding amid increasingly metaphysical considerations. Ben found himself grateful for her straightforward approach, the shadow energy resonating with her clarity of purpose despite its own complex nature. Function over form, he repeated, finding wisdom in the simple concept. So what functions do I have now that integration has completed? We're still determining the full extent, Kai replied, professional curiosity temporarily overriding other considerations. Preliminary observations suggest enhanced perception across dimensional boundaries, direct manipulation of shadow energy without transformation, increased affinity for all umbral technology, and potentially communicate with shadow entities without intermediate translation. The transformation enhancements have stabilized as well, Elena added. Your shadow variants no longer accelerate integration since that process has completed. They now represent established evolutionary pathways rather than transitional forms. The information was simultaneously overwhelming and clarifying. The shadow energy, his shad. Our energy now, helping process implications while maintaining core identity amid transformation. Whatever he had become, he remained Ben Tennyson at his fundamental level, a hero who had faced countless transformations without losing essential purpose or values. Lord Umbra, he said, returning focus to the primary threat. What's his status after the dimensional disruption? Weakened but not defeated, Esther reported grimly. The energy expended in his attempted manifestation would require significant recovery time, but he remains active within the dimensional void. Our intelligence suggests he has recalled most harvester operations to consolidate resources for his next attempt. Which gives us time to prepare, Ben concluded, tactical assessment flowing naturally through shadow-enhanced cognition. We know his objectives now, collection of all 7 keys to enable multiversal harvesting operations. We need to locate the remaining 5 before his forces recover sufficient strength for renewed offensive operations. Always with the hero routine, Kevin commented, though the shadow energy helped Ben perceive the genuine admiration beneath the sardonic tone. Nearly get yourself killed in dimensional collapse. Wake up as some kind of interdimensional shadow being, and immediately start planning the next mission. Some things never change, Gwen added with a smile that conveyed both exasperation and pride. Ben attempted to return the smile, though he wasn't certain how his transformed features responded to the command. The medical monitors beside his bed displayed his reflection, still recognizably himself. But with violet energy now permanently visible in his eyes and subtle shadow patterns occasionally rippling beneath his skin when emotions ran strong. Some things change, he acknowledged, studying his altered appearance with practical acceptance rather than dismay. But core purpose remains consistent. Lord Umbra threatens multiple dimensions with his harvesting operations. Whatever I've become through this transformation, I'm still in a position to stop him, perhaps uniquely positioned now. Luma nodded with approval at his assessment. Strategic clarity despite personal transformation. The mark of a true warrior. The mark of Ben, Gwen corrected gently. He's always been able to see past his own circumstances to focus on protecting others. That's who he is, regardless of form. The shadow energy resonated with this truth, confirming that the integration had enhanced rather than corrupted his essential nature. Whatever challenges lay ahead in confronting Lord Umbra and securing the remaining keys, he would face them with the same determination and purpose that had guided him through years of heroism, now strengthened rather than diminished by the shadow within. As his team continued discussing next steps and recovery protocols, Ben sensed something else through his enhanced perception, connections between himself and each person present. Unique energy signatures that represented bonds transcending conventional relationships. The shadow revealed these connections not as limitations or vulnerabilities but as sources of strength, anchoring his expanded consciousness in relationships that defined him beyond physical form or dimensional boundaries. In completing his integration with the 3rd key, he hadn't lost himself to the shadow. Instead, he'd discovered new dimensions of himself, potential that had always existed, awaiting the catalyst that would bring it into full expression. The journey ahead remained fraught with danger. Lord Umbra's threat undiminished despite temporary setback. But for the first time since the artifact had merged with the Omnitrix, Ben felt genuine confidence in his ability to master these new capabilities without sacrificing his humanity in the process. The shadow was no longer something foreign to be contained or controlled, but an integral aspect of himself to be understood and expressed. In accepting this truth, he found not corruption but evolution, transformation in its most profound sense, becoming more fully himself rather than losing identity to external force. With renewed determination, Ben focused on recovery, knowing each step forward brought not just physical healing but deeper integration of his transformed nature with the hero he had always been and would continue to be, shadow and light united in service to the greater good he had always pursued. Chapter 3 End. The End. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.